we're also on the internet, and I'm going to read some things about how you can also participate in this public meeting. Let me just read this so I don't make a mistake, because this is a first for us as well. This is a first for the city. Today's Board of Supervisors meeting is not open to the public pursuant to the Governor's Declaration of Emergency Directive due to the current coronavirus outbreak. We will also be changing how we do public comment. Public comment will only be taken at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. This can be done via video conference or telephonic appearance using the information provided on the agenda. To simply watch the meeting, you would do so by turning your television to Charter Channel 191 or watch online at carson.org/meetings. The WebEx link and the call-in telephone number should only be used to provide public comment. Using either of these methods, you will initially be placed on hold when you join the meeting until we get to public comment. When it's your turn to speak, you should hear a beep. Then you may begin by stating your first and last name for the record, followed by your comment. From all of us up here on the board, I want to thank you for being patient as we go through these new waters. You'll see that the Board of Supervisors room, everybody is in social distance mode here. We've just got to make sure that, hopefully we can continue to do business and the public can have a transparent way of seeing exactly what we're doing. All right. Dan, you told me I had to do a roll call for the record, right? Okay, good.
Supervisor Giomi?
Here.
Supervisor Bonkowski? Here. Supervisor Bagwell? Here. Supervisor Barrett? Here. Mayor Kroll?
Here.
A quorum's present.
All right. Nancy, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? City manager, county manager, manager.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, now we're on item number 4. This is where we're going to try it on public comment. Is there any public comment today at the beginning of the meeting? Anybody? Can I ask our IT folks, we've got anybody calling in? Anybody? How do I know? Am I talking to somebody? I'm just talking to myself here, huh?
I think there's someone out in the lobby.
So if you have 5 people, public comment,
Okay.
I can grab a microphone and then I can let you know who you're going to let into the room before we announce the meeting. Or how you want to do that. Good, buddy.
Someone out there. Oh, Desi's right here.
All right, I'm being told to go. Give me a second, we'll turn this TV down.
Wait a minute, hold on. Who's going there? Outside? Huh?
All right. Good morning, supervisors, Mr. Mayor. My name is Alex Doors. I am a local business owner and also I'm on the Planning Commission. But this morning I'm just here in the capacity of a citizen. I'll make it quick. There is a water pump station that's going up off of King Street, off of Derby Court specifically. The Planning Commission had heard about it in June. I was out of town during that meeting, so I wasn't part of that meeting. And so I just learned about it last week at our meeting when another special use permit came in to raise the level of the roof. So it just kind of garnered my interest. I stopped by there yesterday. And so I'm here today appealing to you guys as the property owners, so to speak. I was just hoping if it hasn't been looked into a second time by you guys that maybe we could. I think it's a poor location. I think the best of intent was there in putting it there. Obviously, we want to be good neighbors. I don't think we intended to put it right behind someone's yard. I think we intended to notice people, and the notice was confusing. I think it may have been up to snuff. However, an entire neighborhood found it to be confusing, and so they didn't show up to kind of voice their opinion to begin with. So for what it's worth, if you guys could take a look at it for a second time, I think it would greatly benefit the neighbors and be just a good neighborly move. So that's it. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
All right, thank you. Other public comment? Anybody?
Yes,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, hold on one second. Joining the room here, Mr. Mayor, is Jim Rudd.
Jim Wood,
Rudd, sir, Jim Rudd.
RUDD? Okay, Jim, go ahead.
Is his volume unmuted?
Jim, sir, are you there?
I see Stokes. I see Richard.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, looks like Jim is no longer in the room, so I'm going to admit.
Hey, Desi, when you told me that Jim is no longer in the room, can the public hear that so they'll know what's going on, or do I have to repeat that? Will they hear?
They'll get a message from us that they're no longer in the room, sir.
Pardon me?
They'll get a message that they're no longer in the room.
But how about the rest of the public?
For the rest of the public now?
I mean, here's what I'm just, maybe I'm being overly cautious, but I have a gentleman who signed in to talk about public comment, then he left. I think, people on the public out there, if they don't know he left or heard you say he left, then I'm concerned that people are going to think that we're running over public comment.
Yes, they can hear everything that's being broadcasted in the room, online and on TV.
On that one as well? In other words,
Correct.
All right, who's next? On public comment?
Next for public comment, Mr. Mayor, is Mr. Richard Stokes.
Who's he? I'm kidding you, Richard. Good morning. How's the superintendent doing today? I can't hear you, Richard. I see your lips moving.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have a comment. I just wanted to join the meeting. I'm interested in one of the agenda items that you have later on in the meeting. I have several other conferences going on during the same time, so I'm going to try to multitask and look forward to participating maybe later. Thank you so much, and good luck and best wishes with your meeting.
Very good. How are you going to do this for the school board?
Pretty much the same mechanism. We have held one school board meeting already, and it seemed to go okay. We'll try again and maybe learn from your process today.
All right. Thanks, Richard. Okay. Who's next up on public comment?
Next in public comment, Mr. Mayor, is Lynn.
I didn't hear that. Lynn? Is there a last name with that one?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, no last name for Lynn.
Okay. All right. Lynn, are you ready to talk? Ready to present? This is terrible stuff, man. I'm not going to be able to do this.
Are we sure it's working on our end? Because now we've had two people who couldn't.
It's a good idea. Okay, for the public out there, if you can hear me, we're just having a little bit of difficulty getting the next public speaker up here. Just bear with us, please.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, now in the room would be Mr. Reed Kaiser.
Okay. Good morning, Reed. Huh? Reed?
Hi. Do you hear me?
I can hear you, Reed. Go ahead.
Okay,
I can see you.
we would like to speak under public comment.
Right. You're on.
Okay, actually, you don't want to look at me. I'll give you my wife. She's pleasing to the eye.
All right.
Here I come. I'm used to these because of teaching all these Zoom meetings, so it's a
All right.
little different. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad everybody's healthy and you're able to still do all the wonderful things you do for our government and our city, so thank you.
Can I ask you a
As
question?
you want to, Anna Kaiser, I'm just going to read the letter I wrote, but I thought it would be easier. To our city supervisors.
Hey, Jody,
of course,
can I ask
thank
you a question real quick? Jody?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Wait. Yes, go ahead. I'm trying to get the
What do you
speaker up
see,
so I
what
can
do you
hear
see on your computer when you're talking there? I just want to know.
All I
You see the hearing
see
room?
is myself, the same thing as Zoom. I just see a picture of myself.
All right, go ahead, thanks.
As you know, we have been working to have the booster pump station either moved from directly behind our home and/or have the height of the structure modified. We would not see the commercial structure, of course, 5 feet or so above our fence line. And as you know, we live in Long Ranch Estates, which is a planned community with no structure built above the fence line. Can you hear me okay? Yes. My speaker's kind of hazy. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
I'm just assuming you can. Okay, good. Thankfully, last week, we went before the planning commission and they rejected the city's plan to have the height of the building extend to 19 feet 2 inches, which would have had this commercial structure looming about 9 feet above our fence line. In fact, if you watched the planning commission meeting or read the minutes, there was discussion to revoke the permit made by the members of the commission after we presented our concerns, along with our neighbors. We were not only concerned with the original notice being misleading, but with several other misrepresentations in the special use permit. I'm going to send you the letter I wrote. Basically, you can look at the minutes from the planning commission about what they looked at and why they wanted. There was talk of revoking the permit, but even though the planning commission was so supportive of homeowners and their concerns, the planning commission didn't have the authority to revoke the permit because their decision was about approving or denying the height, which of course, as I said, they denied the height. So we now come before our supervisors to work to get this building either moved from homes and or have the height lowered to below the fence line. The permit states that the structure can be 12 to 15 feet in height. And when meeting with the city this week, and of course, everybody, the commissioners, everybody at the city has been nothing but wonderful to work with, so we appreciate it. Again, the planning, okay. When meeting with the city this week, the building is already 15 feet in height and has an exhaust pipe extending above the 15 height requirement. Again, the planning commission did not allow for a height above 15 feet, and they encouraged the city to lower the height as much as they could because of homeowner concerns. In fact, they used the term being neighborly. They encouraged them to be neighborly. We want the city to either move the pump station away from homes or ensure that the height of the structure does not extend above the fence line by lowering the elevation of the building pad. Because as you know, the city's concerned about keeping it out of the floodplain, but if we just lowered the building pad that's already out there, we could keep it above the floodplain but below our fence line. It's the height of the structure, the location of the structure directly behind homes, and the misrepresentations in the permit that are of concern to us. For example, the massive height of the structure was not included in the notice to homeowners, nor in the special use permit, And the concerns with the height of the structure were not mentioned regarding written comments that came in from homeowners in the June 2019 meeting. The only comments from homeowners that were referenced were about noise, and both homeowners were concerned about the height. Let me see, where did I lose my space? In the Carson City Master Plan, which is referenced in the special use permit, as well as the city's own codes and ordinances, which are also referenced in the permit, there are protections for homeowners. I'm just going to read a couple. Provide appropriate height, density, and setback transitions and connectivity to the surrounding development to ensure compatibility with surrounding development. Again, this is a 780 square foot structure that is going to be 15 feet high plus the exhaust pipe, which is even higher than the 15 feet, and it's 30 feet from our fence line. Also, this is in a neighborhood that has no permanent structures above the fence line, and our home would be the only home in the neighborhood that will have a permanent structure built behind it, and the only home with a permanent structure extending to 5 feet above the fence line. Our home will, of course, be the only home with a commercial building directly behind it and in full view. Like I said, about 40 to 50% of our view in the backyard will be a big commercial structure. Our home will, the permit also states, will not be detrimental to the use, peaceful enjoyment, economic value, or development of surrounding properties or general neighborhood, and is compatible with the character and integrity of the adjacent development. Again, this is a 15-foot structure, a commercial structure, that's 780 square feet in full view of our home and backyard. So we'll see the structure from the whole back of our house. We'll see the structure. Anytime you walk into the backyard, you'll see this looming commercial structure. Of course, this is also, like I said, a commercial structure, and it's detrimental to the economic value of our home. As our neighbor stated as well at the commission meeting, this goes against the whole character of the neighborhood. Just two more paragraphs. Again, in reference to our concerns with the height, the original meeting in June 2019, which approved the special use permit, gave no indication of the height concerns that had been expressed by the two homeowners. Here are quotes from the homeowners. Both homeowners referenced height, width, and length concerns, and shape and height. But this was never discussed in the staff report, the homeowners' concerns on height. This is one reason I think the Planning Commission was so surprised at our meeting last week about the height of the structure. As stated before, there are misrepresentations in the original special use permit, including a picture of the property behind the planned pump station, which shows that the property behind the pump station had towering evergreen trees all along the property line. By the way, that's our neighbor's property, not ours. And the pump station is directly behind our property. This picture is not of our property, where there are no evergreen trees along our property line. An image would have given the commission the impression that the pump station would be hidden behind trees instead of completely in full view of the home it is directly behind. Again, there is nothing about the height extending above the fence line, so nearby homeowners can see 780 square feet of a commercial structure 5 feet above their fence line. It's clear that Carson City's codes and ordinance that any misrepresentation made in an application for a variance or a special use permit are grounds for a hearing, revocation, or a re-examination of the variance. So we would like to know the process for either revoking or re-examining this. We contacted Mr. Giomi, and it sounds like we can't revoke it, but at least re-examine it. So the building, again, is below the fence line. If it's going to be directly behind our home, we could lower the building pad and make sure it doesn't extend above. We would also want this issue to be an agenda item so we can be heard. Of course, we would public comment, but it would be nice to have an agenda item so our neighbors and ourselves could express our concerns. As always, thank you for your commitment to our wonderful city, for always working together with our community to come to a resolution. And then my last thing, I didn't put this in the letter, but I was thinking about it. You know, when you're worried about something and you wake up worrying about it. It's a safety question, not an aesthetics question. But is it safe for homeowners? Because there are going to be emissions from the exhaust pipe. Like I said, the pump is going to be running 24/7. And there are going to be 600 gallons of diesel stored in the structure. How will you protect access to the building so no one unauthorized has access to 600 gallons of diesel right next to homeowners and children, of course, playing all through our cul-de-sac? So for me, the thought of not just the aesthetics of the structure, but having 600 gallons of diesel stored so close to homes, of course, to me, seems like a safety. So that's the end of my public comment.
Okay, we got it, Joni. We can't really discuss much further on public comment because it'd be a violation of the open meeting law. But we understand what it is. And my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, somebody in the room here, is there an appeal going on this from the planning commission? No?
No, the planning commission wanted to revoke it that night, but they couldn't because the only thing they were looking at was the extension to 19 feet 2 inches. The city wanted to even go higher than the 15 feet. So they talked about revoking it, but couldn't because their item was just about the 19 feet 2 inches.
Okay. Okay. Anything, questions of Ms. Kaiser? Well done. Well, good speech. Okay, there you go.
Hey,
There's
it's great to see all of you. I'm glad you're healthy and happy and still at work.
Well, I think we're glad we're healthy. I don't know if we're happy, but that's good. Okay. Thanks. All right.
Yeah, well,
Hang in.
and hopefully all of you have had a chance to look at the structure behind our house.
I have.
Speaking of being happy, go
think we
out for a
have.
walk, keep your social distance, and you'll be able to see it for yourself.
Okay, I've been there. I think probably everybody's been there, but, okay, all right.
I'm gonna send just the pictures so you have it.
All right.
Thank you.
You bet. All right,
Let me see how I can get off of this.
stay there if you want. Okay, all right.
Okay, Mr.
Next on
Mayor,
public comment.
next for public comment is A. Evans.
A. Evans.
One time.
Okay, let's give it a try.
Cummins conversion to it and a compound turbo. It was almost like.
Mr. Evans, you're up for public comment.
No, thank you. This is Amanda. I'm just watching for Dagny.
This is the mayor, Bob. I didn't hear that.
Watching for Dagny. She doesn't want.
Hi, Mayor. This
Oh,
is
you don't want
Amanda
it.
from NACO. I'm just observing.
Okay, I got it. All right. We'll tell Dagny that you were there, not out playing around. Okay, go.
And just a reminder to the public, if you're not making public comment, the best way to view the meeting is going to carson.org/meetings rather than being on the WebEx. The WebEx is just for public comment.
Right. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Who's next? Desi?
Next for public comment, looks like it's Diane Baker.
Okay. Good morning, Diane.
There, Bob, I didn't hear that.
Well, I'm in.
I got it.
So, I will see you via.
In a few minutes.
Screen.
Just a reminder. Diane, are you making public comment? Carson.org.
Desi, what's going on out there? Where's Diane?
It looks like she just left the room, Mr. Mayor.
Is she coming? Do we know if she's coming back?
I don't see her right now.
I think they're logging onto the WebEx thinking that they're just watching the meeting rather than
Oh, okay.
using the WebEx for public comment, so.
All right.
Next in the room, Mr. Mayor, is Michael Smith.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Thinking that they're just watching the meeting rather than using the WebEx for public.
You got to get closer to the mic, I think, somehow. I can't hear you, Mike.
Next in the room, Mr. Mayor, is Michael Smith.
Okay.
Good
Go,
morning, good morning, Mayor, and the, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, let me adjust my volume. Can you hear me? I can get closer. Okay, let me adjust my volume.
Excuse me, Mr. Smith, if you could, yes, perfect. Excuse me, Mr. Smith, if you could stop the stream that you're watching. We're getting feedback from your stream over our microphones. Excuse me, Mr. Smith, if you could stop the stream that you're watching. We're getting feedback from your stream over our microphones.
Well, stop the stream.
Mr. Smith, if you could stop the stream that you're watching. We're getting feedback from your stream over our microphones.
Well, is that better?
Hey, Desi, this is the mayor. Who's doing the background on this thing? Huh?
Oh,
He is watching
Okay.
on his computer and he's called in. So it's a loop. So
Did you hear that, Mike? You can't watch it and call in at the
this
same
is
time.
Mike Smith.
There it is.
Hello?
I can't hear you, Mike. Or Desi, I can't hear you. We can't hear you here. Still can't hear you.
Let me do that.
Desi, can you walk Mike through the connection, please?
Can you, is there a number I can call other than the one I called earlier?
Desi, can you walk Mike through the connection, please?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor. Mike, so what's happening is we're getting feedback from you watching the stream, as well as you trying to communicate with our WebEx session. There should be a phone number on our carson.org page that led you to this link that you can call into, and we'll be able to allow you into the room. Or if you just stop watching the feed through the internet and just allow the WebEx to communicate back and forth, we should be okay.
The call-in number and the meeting ID is on the agenda, Mike. It's on the heading of the agenda. Huh? Yeah. But you're on,
Let me see if
called
I
in
can
as well
attempt
as.
to call you via the number that was in Carson now and on your website.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike.
But you're on,
Let me call.
what's happening is it's like calling into a radio show. You have the radio turned up and you're on your phone calling into a radio show. It's the same thing. And this is going to be a problem for both John and I when we talk out here. I don't know if we can turn these speakers off because that's going to continue to happen.
Improve the
Okay, what are we doing
notice
now,
to
guys?
indicate
It looks
no
like-
streaming.
What's happening now, Desi? I mean,
It looks like-
people are listening to us, they got blank air. I mean, we gotta.
Correct.
Well, I know we're working through all this stuff, but let's just take a deep breath and see if we can get this one, get Mike on here without having a lot of feedback. All right.
It looks like we have two more people for public comment.
Right.
This is Daniel.
I have no comment at this time. I just was in listening, guys. Thanks for doing the meeting remotely.
We all hear that? What'd he say?
He said he has no public comment at this time. He
Okay.
was just watching.
All right. Where'd Mike go, Desi?
I have not seen Mike
Oh, he's at
re-enter the
home,
room.
right, okay. All right.
No, but to tell him to,
Now in the room, Mr. Mayor, is Ronald Bratch.
Okay. Good morning, Ronald.
Ronald, you're in the room for public comment. Mr. Mayor, it looks like Ronald is no longer present for public comment.
All right. Mike Smith back?
No, Mr. Mayor, I do not see Mike Smith in the room.
Okay. Who's RB then? Huh?
that was Ronald Brad.
Okay.
There's no one else in the room at this time for public comment.
All right. Is there anybody else out there in Cyberland that wants to do public comment? Because the next time we'll do it at the end. And again, we apologize down here for, kind of things going slow and a couple of hiccups. We'll get there. Okay, let's now take up item number 5. This is potential approval of the minutes of February 20th and March 5th. Everybody had a chance to read those? Somebody want to make a motion on either one or both?
Yeah, I have a couple of corrections.
Go.
I move to correct the minutes of the Board of Supervisors for February 20th with the following corrections. The first correction is on page 13 in the minutes in the 4th paragraph, second line. It should say Mayor Crowell commented. We need to change the word to commented. The second correction is on page 15, about halfway down the page. It should say Supervisor Bagwell instead of Trustee Bagwell. So I move to approve the minutes with those two corrections.
Second.
That's for February 20th, 2020. On the motion, there's a motion and a second on the motion discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, I think.
Then I move
gonna
to approve the minutes of the Carson City Board of Supervisors for March 5th, 2020 as presented.
All right, go.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the motion discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Let's take up the agenda. Anybody want to change anything we can do on the agenda? City manager, is there any changes? You had one change last night about coronavirus stuff.
Oh, right. We added an item at the end to discuss just various directives and concerning the coronavirus and other department updates.
All right. All right.
Mr.
Board
Mayor?
members, anybody want anything moved? Taken
Mr.
off?
Mayor?
Yes, go. Sorry.
Michael Smith called me yesterday, and he wanted to offer his testimony regarding the SROs, the
Right.
sheriff, and so he may call in again And I don't know whether he wants to do that or not. But I told him at that time we would probably only take testimony at the beginning and at the end. And at the end, it'll be too late. So for that item, we might want to take testimony.
I guess at the end of the day, you know, I had the same conversation with Mike. You know, my suggestion to him was you might want to listen to the evidence on that one before you weigh in on a public comment. And that's why I suggested you do it at the end. But, you know, maybe you're right, the motion may be made by then or not made. That's how we have to do business here. All right, let's take up, if there's no objection, then we'll take the agenda as published. Let's take up the consent agenda. Anybody want anything moved from the consent agenda? Motion's in order.
I move to approve the consent agenda as published.
There's a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second by Chief Giommi, Supervisor Giommi. On the motion, discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. That's the end of consent agenda. Let's take up item number 11, Public Works. This is the easement agreement with Carlos and Hillary Mendeguia. The city engineer is coming back. Are you doing your social distancing there, Mr. Stuckey?
I am, yes, sir, Mayor, I am.
You know I'm gonna come out there and check up on you.
Okay, that sounds great. We always like to see you. So I've got, there's a lot going on with this agreement, so I just wanted to walk you through it, and then obviously I'll be around to answer questions. The Mendeguias approached the city. You can see their house there in the middle of that slide there. They approached the city. It's been over a year now. They're essentially remodeling their house. The way I understand it, it's essentially a rebuild of their house, so a pretty extensive effort there. They would like to run a gas line out to their house, and as well as they have an existing access, which you can see it's over kind of the top right of that slide there, and it goes across the ditch there. It's an old wooden bridge. It's not very safe. So they requested to see if the city would be willing to grant an easement across our property, which is shown in the blue hatch there. You can see the line there. That's where their public access easement would be through the city property. There would also be the gas line that would run through to serve their property. So the blue is everything that the Mendeguias had requested from the city. The red is everything that we requested back from the Mendeguias in this agreement. And what the red is there's a reclaimed water line, and that's that purple line that runs through the exhibit there. The red hatch over that purple line is a water easement across the Mendeguias property, an easement for our reclaimed water line across the Mendeguias property. And we had that easement established previously, but there were some errors in the easement and we wanted to correct it. It's been on our list for a while, so this was the opportunity to do that, and the Mendeguias were willing to allow us to do that. And then our Parks and Rec and Open Space Group Department has had a master plan to extend a trail, and that's that kind of triangular piece there on the south. Well, so north is facing to the right, so it's actually the southeast corner of their property to expand a future trail in the future. So this was an opportunity to we initially approached them about getting an easement, but we ended up with getting the land donated to us. So that's all in this agreement. So the land donation for the future trail, the reclaimed water line easement, that is what the city would be getting. And then the blue is the public access easement, and then a utility easement to run a public utility easement for gas. So that is what is happening in this agreement. I do have a couple corrections, and I did want to point out there's an item 21 in that easement agreement, talks about fencing and kind of the what we worked out, and I'll just go through that a little bit. It is the desire for typically when we have a property, we want to distinguish it from the public access and the trail, so we usually build these split rail fences with a lot of our trail properties. We want to do that with this. So the city has agreed to build our standard split rail fence at the time that the trail becomes public. So this, we can't predict that yet until the trail's built. Sometime in the future, we would install and pay for that fence. I put a construction cost estimate for fiscal impact in today's dollars. It's about $4,500, I think, is what we estimated. Obviously, that might be 10 years from now or 5 years from now, but that's part of it. The other language in that section, if the Mindaguillas were to want to build a fence earlier, the cost would be on them to build that. Also, at the time that we wanted to build the fence, if the Mindaguillas, requested a more expensive or extensive style fence, and we were okay with that, we could work together with them, but the cost from the city would be no more than the cost of a split rail fence. So they'd be getting quotes from contractors and we'd pick the lowest bid there. So I did want to kind of explain that because that was a little bit tough to understand, I think, that section. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to go to a couple corrections that were noted on the exhibits. So this will be page 14 of your pack of the agenda item supporting documents. The top sentence there.
I don't have it marked as 14 unless I'm.
So it's Exhibit A, access easement. Oh, sorry.
159 or 145?
It's the second page of Exhibit A, access easement. It'll look like this. I think that's it, yeah.
146 on mine.
Okay. The sentence there reads, the sidelines of said easement are to be shortened of lengthened. It should be shortened or lengthened, so that correction will be made. If you go to the next page, Exhibit A1, there's the work that's been done for this exhibit is all good. It's more just some minor items like the property owner names. One of the property owner names is Sliger, it should be Robbers, and they refer to Carson City property as open space, and it should just be Carson City, so those corrections will be made. There also was the APN that the access easement is going across is labeled as 010-581-15. It should be -17, so that will be made. And then basically on Exhibit C1, roughly the same changes will be made on that. And that's just changing that APN from 010-581-15 to -17. And then the last change is Exhibit A1, and that's just the same changes that we made on Exhibit A. So we'll work and make sure that gets corrected before this is recorded.
Dan, and on Exhibit A, utility and access easement, it's the same shortened or lengthened.
Exhibit A?
Yeah. No, you said Exhibit A1.
Oh, no, Exhibit A. I got that. Okay. I think I might have said Exhibit A1. Apologies for that. It is Exhibit A, and we'll make that correction. And that's all I had. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We also had the Mindaguillas, I believe, are on the line. If you would like to speak to them, I can also call them from my cell phone if that works better.
Let's see where it goes. Any questions of Mr. Stuckey? Questions?
If you look at
Supervisor Wojciechowski, go.
If you look at Exhibit A1, is that the same issue with the parcel number on the Empire Ranch Golf Course property? That's 010-581-15. Is that different than the corrections on the other two maps?
The Empire Ranch Golf Course parcel number is correct. It's -15.
Okay.
It's the city, the parcel that the easement is going across. That's also labeled -15 and should be -17.
Which it is on Exhibit A1, so it would need to be corrected. They're both parcels have the same parcel number.
Yeah. So I'll correct the one on where the easement's going across to -17.
Okay.
And go. Jump in there.
So I just want to clarify too, for the record, that the fencing money for this project is going to come from the Quality of Life Fund. I just think we should put that on the record.
I believe that is correct. Jen Budge is out in the hall if she wants to correct me on that, but that is my understanding. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that is correct.
Great, I'm sorry, Stacy, go ahead, Chief.
That's okay. So I just, I'm trying not to get feedback, on the access easement in the blue, that property isn't being deeded to them. It's just an easement to allow them to cross that?
Yes.
Any other questions? Are the Mendeguias on the line?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, they're in the room.
Okay, here's my question to you. Do you have any question? Did Mr. Stuckey, our city engineer, accurately describe what's going on in your opinion? If he did, I'm going to suggest that you don't need to testify, but if he didn't, I'm going to suggest that you come up and talk. That's why I'm asking that. Hello? Sound like a...
I think there's a delay as part of the problem. You're asking them questions and they're seconds behind from hearing it.
Oh.
I think too, when Desi says they're in a room that's a virtual room, that's not this room.
It's a strange new world, man.
Got that right, man.
Desi, Dan's just going to call him on his cell phone.
Okay.
Have you been watching? His question was whether, the way I described the agreement is accurate, and you guys are comfortable with that. So I'm going to put you on speakerphone to answer that question. You might want to mute your computer as well when you talk. Thanks. So Carlos, I have you on speakerphone.
Okay, yes, that was accurate.
It was accurate? Okay, I assume that you don't want to say anything more, or do you want to add anything to what Mr. Stuckey said, Carlos?
He laid it out pretty clearly.
All right. All right, board, are we ready for this one?
Yeah.
Okay, want to make a motion?
Sure.
Chief?
I move to approve the easement agreement and deed with the Mendeguias and the easement deed grant to Southwest Gas with the changes read into the record by City Engineer Dan Stuckey, and further to authorize the city engineer to complete the lot line adjustment.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, let's take up item number 12. This is possible purchase of 2 new ambulances for the fire department utilizing joiner contract AM 10-18 through H Golf Alpha Charlie By for a total not to exceed, I wonder how they got this, $499,354. They should have just made it anyway. They gotta get down to the penny, I guess. All right, who's doing this one? Oh, okay, Mr. Schultz, you gotta do this, or is
Good morning.
Sean still, he's still quarantining?
Our fire chief is still quarantined, yes. Darren Schultz for the record with Public Works. I do have members from Fleet out in the hallway as well as members from the FD that can answer specific questions if we get to that point. What we're here asking for today is to approve purchasing 2 new ambulances. These will replace existing ambulances that we are currently using. The goal today is to help our emergency response, put them in equipment that is reliable, put them in equipment that is newer, can meet the needs of new technology, things that they're working with. So our current 2 ambulances, we would take the part of them out of service, which is the boxes, the part that sits on the back. That's the real outdated. That would completely go out of service. The chassis that are underneath have not been totally used up, so those would be repurposed into our fleet, into a general fund assignment. And I'll close with that and open to any questions.
Just for a point of personal interest, what do you do with the box after you take them off? What happens to them?
We will try to see if there's a market out there it would have to go to auction, but typically at this age, there's not much value in them, so they would probably be scrapped out. Not by us, but through an auction process.
Mayor, I can add a little bit to that. Those boxes have been repurposed already, so they've already been removed off the original chassis they were on and put onto these chassis. So we've gotten probably, gosh, I'll bet you 10 to 12 years out of these boxes.
18 years.
There you go.
Okay, questions? Supervisor Bienkowski.
Darren, could you go over the augmentation? Our packet says that this was budgeted for and then says that we need to augment the budget for it. So can you walk us through why that's necessary?
I can. I apologize. I said I would do that and I didn't. The way it's worked up, the ambulance fund, money accumulates in there. If it doesn't get spent, it carries over from year to year until there's a capital need to get spent. And then that money moves from that account into a capital account to actually be spent. So in this case, that's how the money would be used. We say it's budgeted. We didn't mean that to be a misnomer in terms of there's not a capital account specifically set up ahead of this budget year that said we would do this, but the money is existing in the ambulance fund that would be moved there to spend.
Okay. Questions, further questions of Mr. Schultz or anybody we want to bring in? We okay with this? Motion's in order.
I move to approve the purchase as presented.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, let's take up the sheriff issue of school resource officers. This is item number 13. This is let me just read it. Discussion and possible action regarding an agreement between the Carson City School District and Carson City continuing the school resource officer program at the school district, and through which the city and school district will split the personnel costs of 3 SROs, approximately $430,438.81 for FY 2021. Good morning, Sheriff. How we doing out there?
We're having fun out in the hallway.
Oh, I mean out on the streets, man.
Just give me one second, okay? Ah, Lord. This is strange, this whole setup, but we'll get by. Getting a little bit of feedback, a little bit of a feedback. Let's see if everything's going okay. Well, thank you.
You bet.
We're kind of here as a follow-up to, I'm gonna have to get used to that. Follow-up to the joint board meeting and with the school district, and talk about a little bit more about the SRO program that's taking place here in Carson City. And I would like to emphasize that as the sheriff's department looks at things, data, community activities, and so on and so forth, numbers don't always draw a conclusion. Numbers inspire intelligent conversations, and I think that that's what we're here for. I would also like to caveat that while we do talk about the SRO program and its implementations and such, that's not to berate our past administrations and such. SRO programs are not new here in Carson City, but we went for quite a long time without, and so we're back on track now. I'm going to try and get through this pretty well. We do have a representative from the school district out in the hallway if there are questions.
Got Stokes on the internet here too,
Okay.
wherever they are.
And a lot of this, Mr. Mayor, you folks are probably well aware of, but I would like to take the opportunity so that our public can view this as well, that is watching today. Mass casualty events and the threats at educational institutions across the nation have highlighted the necessity to provide for on-site law enforcement presence and in our educational environments. As a result, communities all the way across the country have established school district police departments, such as exist in Washoe County and Clark County, and in more rural environments, school-based law enforcement officers, such as exist here in Carson City, as well as other Nevada rural counties. Noteworthy, the Sheriff's Office here in Carson City embraces a working relationship with the University of Nevada, Reno, providing coverage to our local college. The goal of the SRO programs are a collaborative efforts by police, agencies, law enforcement officers, educators, students, parents, and communities. The goal of the SRO program is to provide a safe learning environment provide valued resources to the school staff members, foster positive relationships with students, and develop strategies to resolve problems that affect our youth, with the goal of protecting all children so that they can reach their fullest potential. Locally, the School Resource Officers Program is a joint venture between the City of Carson, the Sheriff's Office, and the Carson City School District to
While
enhance
you're on
this.
that number there, somebody asked me, to just clarify, is the 403,000, is that the total amount that the city's paying, or is it half of that the city's paying? The 403,000, 430,000, I'm sorry. Is that the city's
I believe
responsibility?
that's the total split.
That's the total, and it'll be split with the school district,
Okay, so
50/50.
just want to clarify that.
Okay.
Because there are people out there who believe that, the 430 is all on our shoulders.
All right. Just for a brief background, in approximately 2015, the Sheriff's Office received a 3-year grant for the implementation of the School Resource Officer Program. That grant shared responsibilities between the local school district and the city. This program provided for a ratio of officers per thousands of students of 0.4, while the community-wide ratio of officers is 1.7, excluding the jail operations. This grant has expired, and in 2019, the school district was able to achieve funding for 2 additional officers in the program. The additional officers not only provide for more regular hour coverage of the schools, but also adjusted the officer-to-student ratio to 0.6 officers per thousand. Funding was accepted and the new positions were filled in 2019. Yeah, you said it would work. No. Thank you. In an attempt to provide as much information as possible based on your request, and multiple systems have been queried, the results can cause variations not only in this presentation, but in much of what you see and hear of taking place. There are variations in our ability to present this information to you. Multiple sources of information may create variations of the data retrieved. Uniform crime reporting is based on a calendar year inconsistent with the fiscal year of the school district, of the schools. Effective January 2020, the Uniform Crime Reporting is replaced by a National Incident-Based Reporting System, NIBRS. Here in Carson City, we became certified in January of this year, obviously midway through the school year. UCR data is published by the state normally in approximately the June timeframe for the previous year. Therefore, 2019 UCR data is not officially published by Crime and Justice in the state of Nevada. The school year is normally based on the period of August through June. Thank you. And fiscal budgets are based on local fiscal years, while the federal grant cycles is normally the October through September timeframe. So there is a lot of variation in the information that I'm presenting to you. Law enforcement the law enforcement data is, I'm sorry. I should have brought my glasses in. No, that would be a violation. Law enforcement data is not suggested to represent in any way the judicial or administrative outcomes, which can significantly differ from the department information. In some cases, the sheriff's office does not possess certain information, such as acceptance and success rates of referral services and associated agencies. In order to address the School Resource Officer Program, one has to understand how it fits into the overall strategic plan of the Sheriff's Office. This is especially important since some of the data of expressed interest may have no tracking mechanisms or devices, and limitations do exist within the department. For example, the number of consultations with counselors engaged with a particular student's activities happens on a continuous basis, both scheduled and unscheduled. Therefore, I do not ask officers to carry with them tick sheets of any type to document their every activity. Likewise, communications within the walls of our schools is limited at best. Therefore, our dispatch or communication facilities where some of this data is derived from is not always aware of the activities that are taking place. Within the Sheriff's Office, the overall strategic plan is supported by 5 divisional plans and 7 other groups that are intermingled and each having an overlapping responsibility. The tracking system for monitoring the strategic plan is automated and updated monthly and continuously evolving with information and data. For the purposes of this briefing today, I'm not accessing the automated system, but instead have made some screen copies for your information. Consistent to the entire department are 5 major perspectives. Those are to deter crime, communicate with our customers as we are doing here today, limit liability to the city, employ the best officers and civilians as we possibly can, and effectively manage the department's resources. Since the School Resource Officers Program has major overlapping responsibilities with the Patrol Division, and SROs must be certified in patrol operations to be assigned to the program, the unit falls under the the Patrol Operations Command. Within the Patrol Operations Division, the School Resource Officer Program is monitored under the perspective of deterring crime and under the objective to locate, identify, and resolve problems consistent with the goals. There are 3 major tracking mechanisms for the School District Support Management Program to include program efficiency, juvenile services, and to reduce arrests here in this community. What you see here is a clip or a slide of the overall effectiveness of the perspective of deterrent crime. At its highest level, I expect that the SRO program will contribute directly to the reduction of overall crime in the community. This is consistent with studied and established known contributing factors of crime in any community across America. And in fact, previous uniform crime data reporting suggests that slightly less than 10% of our index crime rate here in Carson City is juvenile related. Of important note to your view, the Sheriff's Office automated systems is based on triggers that are red, yellow, and green that you may see up on the screen, as well as scaling from 1 to 10. Those devices or those mechanisms are not pass-fail. They are merely attention-drawing alerting mechanisms. The system then calculates data into the scale of 1 to 10, as you see here at the top left of your screen. A score of 10 suggests that the evaluated performance is meeting the expectations, while a 1 would indicate that the data being analyzed is failing to meet established expectations. The system also notes what contributing data is used to determine or is being used in the analysis. As you can see at the highest levels, the objectives noted including, as you will see in the SRO program, are continuing to perform as expected, and UCR reporting for 2019 is expected to show our lowest crime levels since the inception in 1994, which we've already spoken about, as a positive indicator. Again, youth activities are considered by law enforcement as having large impacts on index crimes within the community. Moving a step closer to the SRO program itself, as seen here in the data block, the program is intended to locate, identify, and resolve problems. Our traffic management, our SRO unit, and our proactive enforcement, better known as SET, are all programs designed to target crimes or problems at their lowest levels, thereby preventing major occurrences in the community. For all 3 units, the loss of life is obviously at the top of our priorities. The 3 units are performing well. This is a significant piece of the data for your review, since as stated earlier, divisions and units have overlapping responsibilities and each contributes to a greater success. Note, if you will, the dip in the performance in November 2019 that you can see up on the screen. As we will go through this, you will see related juvenile factors that played significantly into these circumstances as we go. Excuse me. We now hit directly into the information that you've requested, the School Resource Officer Program. This area of operations is measured by efficiency, work tasks related to juvenile services, and juvenile arrests. As you saw in the previous slide presentation, the dip in October through December of 2019, there was considerable corresponding circumstances taking place in support of the school district. Challenges popped up this school year with students gradually in the August-September timeframe, then became major issues in approximately October as we briefed the joint board. Coincidentally, additional officers became available in October of 2019 as the new grant was accepted and staffed, and we were able to address and correct those issues in a relatively short order and return our effectiveness back up where we wanted it. After jointly addressing the challenges of school officials, we were able to recover, as you can see to the far right of the screen, measured on that monthly basis. Next. Here again, you can see for yourself the major challenge period that faced the SRO effectiveness in the schools and the response glide back to its anticipated effect levels. Analyzing the effectiveness of the program, we take into consideration the volume of activities being generated within the school environments and the level of informal and formal referrals being handed off to our juvenile services, who have a major impact on this program, and the total of arrests being made by deputies as a result of the programs being identified. In 2019, Carson High School generated more activities than both middle schools combined. Aggressive corrective actions by officers and the school district were successful at returning the campus to a relatively safe normalcy. While incidents causing arrest hovered at a high success rate for quite some time, incidents exploded in the fall of 2019 and took several months to repair. This is extremely important since the program is designed to create safe school campuses everywhere. As we passed through the end of the year, the program began to restore positive evaluations. Reflected in our school-to-school calls for service, tracking mechanisms, much of the problems affecting the successes of the program were identified to be taking place at the high school, where now we have 2 officers permanently assigned. This staffing adjustment was strongly encouraged by the school district, high school staff, and in agreement with the sheriff's office, especially since the high school obviously has the greatest concentration of youth in the community. Related to this perspective is the parallel impact on other entities within the city. As you are very well aware, all arrested juveniles are processed through juvenile services. With their aging facilities, it is difficult to effectively and efficiently manage and create best practice referrals and managing when the volume of the youth entering into the confines of the facility reach their capacity. Capacity surges are not uncommon at the Carson City juvenile detention facilities, and we have to house students or juveniles elsewhere. Even today, with the coronavirus impacts on the correction facilities across the nation, the releases of low-risk, nonviolent inmates, at last count, we still have up to 7 juveniles who remain in custody here in Carson City. For public safety and the SRO program effectiveness, the bottleneck remains a serious challenge that endangers our investments into the future of our youth.
Would you go over that one more time, please?
Sure. Even today, as we are trying our best in all correctional facilities, that would be the prisons, the jails, and the juvenile services facilities. Even as we reduce those populations in response to the coronaviruses, we still today at last count and as of Monday, have 7 juveniles in custody here in Carson City. And they have to remain in custody due to the violent nature of their offenses.
Thank you.
Back one. Yeah. There are a few topics in the community that I intentionally avoid public comment on, and this is one. However, as the board is asked to discuss the efficiency and effectiveness of the school resource program, I must prevent this measure. The first primary measure of program effectiveness and efficiency is within the critical nature of the purpose of staffing and protecting the students, faculties, and properties of the educational institutions in the community. Reflecting back to the purpose and goals of the school resource officers programs nationwide, protecting our students and facilities, faculty must be of the highest level nature or measure. To date this year, we have lost no students or faculty members to violence or accidental cause. This is a critical key performance measure since few circumstances rise to the level of catastrophic loss as a student or a teacher. We have witnessed in the past few years, Carson City has lost students to tragedy or serious bodily injury as a result of accidents. However, noting that those losses and serious injuries, such as was suffered in the Kings Canyon traffic accident that we are all aware of, were purely of accidental origin and not the result of preventable contributing factors such as drugs and alcohol, give credit to our educators and our officers alike. Further, violent acts on the campus will be displayed here in a moment, but to date this year, we have successfully addressed all of these incidents off the campuses. Our deputy sheriffs stand on the front line to protect our students and staffs each day by deterrence and ready preparedness to this end. and we know that we have suffered losses. To their role in working with the educators to mentor, teach, and collaborate with students, we hope that the decision-making tools carried out by our students will lead to safety both on and off the campus. So far this year, we have suffered no accidental losses, but there are still challenges. Nancy? Calls for service that have originated or presented to the Communications Center have shown increased engagement over the past several years. Notably, SROs are confronting weapons, usually lower-grade weapons such as knives, in the school environment, but guns are not excluded. This past year, the unit has not seized any guns, as Brad had asked during the previous presentation, on the school campus. That is not to say that those incidents did not take place, but we were able to address them off the campus, which is the preferred method of the sheriff's office. It is our policy and practice of the department that threats to the schools be immediately addressed without regard to the time of day or day of the week. Therefore, and most preferable, SROs and other deputies respond to most threats when discovered in the home environments of the persons conveying the threat. This response technique acknowledges that most weapons of violence, guns, etc., will be obtained in the home environment rather than being purchased, since juveniles cannot legally make those purchases themselves. Additionally, while safeguarding the schools, having investigators in the homes of the offenders allows a greater access to materials that might prove or disprove the immediacy of a threat to the schools. Also, a main advantage tool at the disposal of school administrators and law enforcement are safe and anonymous reporting platforms such as SafeVoice, where many tips are originated from. Year-round, the SROs are staffed to intercede with juveniles on related matters and answering calls for service that revolve around juveniles. This is an important point, as SROs take special instructions from my administration so as to avoid conflict or violations of granting authorities, such as the School Resource Officer Grant Program. As anticipated yearly, once school is let out, the summer months bring on many juvenile issues, and we expect it to increase. June is normally one of the sheriff's office busiest periods of the years as students are released from their school environments.
You may not see that this year.
The kids have been great these past couple of weeks, and I appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
In 2017, the Sheriff's Office reported through Uniform Crime Reporting over 400 arrests of juveniles, severely straining juvenile justice systems and juvenile services. During that year, total arrests were nearly as high as those levels prior to the implementation of the School Resource Office Program. This was alarming to both school officials and law enforcement alike. However, the spike in arrest was consistent with other responses to juvenile issues taking place on campus in the form of violence to students and away from the campus properties itself. Noteworthy, only one offense involving weapons took place in 2017. This incident was actually a result of threats or perceived threats between students of different schools within the region, and the weapons seized during the conflict were off campus. As a result, the second student was detained for similar threatening postures, but was not armed at the time. Requested information for truancy is not available for this presentation, as I think Ms. Bagwell had asked. According to the school district staff, valid usable truancy rates that are consistent and applicable to this briefing do not exist. Regardless, SROs are available to assist with truancy matters and have readily available resources to assist, such as the Ron Wood Family Resource Center, where some of the circumstances are referred to.
On that slide, Sheriff, it says prior to SRO program. You want to talk about that a minute?
Pardon me?
Up on the right-hand corner of that slide, prior to SRO program, the number of arrests, did you go over to that?
Yeah. For your information, in the top upper right-hand corner, I just put a note up there. Prior to the SRO program implementation, 2014, 380 students were arrested, and in 2015, just as the program was taking off, 420 arrests were being made. On that last slide, 411 in 2017, which was a marked year for us. 2018, the slide that should be up on the screen right now, you see that those arrests came back down into our anticipated levels of 270, far, far below what was taking place before. In 2018, the School Resource Officer Program regained the momentum of reducing the circumstances causing juvenile arrests, allowing for approximately 25% decline from the 2017 levels. This year presented significant arrest reductions from years prior to the program implementation. However, as a signal of the critical need to school officers, there were 3 juveniles arrested for weapons-related offenses. This information should be significant to policymakers both here in this room and with the school district, as efficiency and effectiveness are often overwhelmed by the need, merely because such juvenile information is not always advertised. In 2018 and again in 2020, arrests have been made on juveniles for extreme violence related to marijuana and marijuana derivative buys. In the most recent case, 4 juveniles were arrested here in Carson City. 2 of those juveniles were from Carson, 1 from Carson High, 1 from Carson Middle School. 1 student was a Douglas County High School student, and 1 student was out of Washoe County. The Washoe County student had recently relocated to Carson City, but had been expelled from the school due to disciplinary issues immediately prior to the shooting incident. All of the recovered weapons were either stolen or taken from family members without the knowledge of the adults. This is a strong example of the use of the SROs on juvenile matters that do not always coincide with the traditional school year or properties. SROs have added authorities and authorizations to access district information when responding to calls for service such as missing children, runaway reports, which we average anywhere from 40 to 60 a year here in this community, parties, specialized enforcement, both drugs, alcohol, driving, and concentrations of youth, curfew matters, and special events that draw heavy juvenile attendance. Next. Okay. The demand for law enforcement at schools continues to grow, indicating positive engagement and cooperation among the schools, the police, students, and juvenile justice authorities alike. Set aside this year's coronavirus pandemic, calls for service to the school district were anticipated to top 3,000. This is in addition to off-hour juvenile calls and seasonal school breaks. This places an extreme pressure point on juvenile services for best practice methodologies for dealing with juvenile issues are strained by outdated facilities and limited capacities. Common occurrences exist today when families are broken as a result of housing juveniles outside the boundaries of Carson City due to maximum capacities and staffing. Related very strong to the SRO program, I encourage the board members to actively connect themselves with juvenile authorities who are linked directly with our SRO programs, both for custody matters and probationary responsibilities, as well as referral services. While this circumstance certainly gives a dim look onto the future of our youth, it also demonstrates that the efficient and interagency cooperation that exists within the program and the strain on the effective and proper programming and referral resources availability. As a whole, Nevada is strained for resources to manage juvenile challenges. Much work is needed in this jurisdiction as well as across the state to keep up with the increasing demand. My strongest suggestion is to refer juvenile resource and management questions to Ms. Bannister, the Chief of Juvenile Justice, as there, under her authority, rest many of the answers of the follow-on activities that are obviously confronted head-on by law enforcement officers and turned over to juvenile justice. Yeah. As stated in the goals of the School Resource Officer Program, mentoring and creating strong relationships with our youth are critical elements of safeguarding our students and faculties. Deputies are continuously consulted within their assigned schools on matters related to student behaviors and external environmental conditions. They provide awareness groups, training to students, faculties, and parenting on gang awareness issues, drugs, alcohol, driver's training, and event support. Officers are assigned and present at most large gathering events, including athletic events such as basketball and football games. The Sheriff's Office has streamlined its participation in high school senior projects. Now in its 4th year of supporting efforts, The most recent class that just ended just before this epidemic broke out saw the largest engagement of students and SROs to date. Those familiar with the Ormsby Room at the Sheriff's Office, where classes were taught one night a week for approximately 10 weeks, students filled the room to its seating capacity. This is an excellent example of the relationship-building measures. In addition to our off-hour law enforcement responses and support to school-related programs, school resource officers also participate with other agencies involved in student welfare initiatives. Among those most notable, and both the mayor and I have been at some of the graduations, is the Juvenile Justice Wilderness Program put on by Juvenile Services. Officers engage with challenged students throughout the summer months, off hours from the school years, in efforts to teach, mentor, and educate students for a more positive future. Through other supportive activities, the Sheriff's Office builds trust and confidence that when a student is seeing something wrong, they can rely on those officers to report it, and in many cases anonymously make those reports. This programming has shown extremely positive results and allowed us to take on the most dangerous activities away from the school campus so that it does not infect the learning environments. Some have asked, obviously for legitimate purposes of budgeting and community priorities, to quantify the value of or detail of the school resource officer program, which can be challenging. At the top and most significant, the community has not suffered any violent deaths of at any school campus. However, data has shown that the threat to violence on the campus remains very high. SRO program responses is immediate, 24 hours a day, all year long, and focuses on those circumstances that occur to manage those circumstances away from the campuses. Secondly, we look at deaths of students off campus, such as we've experienced in the Kings Canyon and other areas. The conclusion of the review was that those deaths and critical injuries were the result of accidents with no drugs or alcohol involved, purely accidents. Similarly, the community has not suffered any suicides by juveniles in quite a few years, a matter that is taken on very aggressively by the school district, all school employees, and our SRO programs. Significantly, safe voice tips and other reporting mechanisms such as relationship building with students with suicidal thoughts or ideations remains one of the most common reports responded to by school resource officers around the clock, as well as district employees. And I would suggest to you that during this period of the epidemic, those calls for service have surged. No one can contest the decline in juvenile arrests over the years. Accessing uniform crime data reporting back to the mid-1990s, we saw juvenile arrests in this community at well over the 1,000 mark annually. Over the last 17 years, ever-improving relationships forged with the school district and the sheriff's office, such as the School Resource Officers Program, with emphasis on education in our schools, intervention activities by juvenile services, and school district employees, awareness and immediacy of law enforcement response to manage circumstances at its lowest levels have proven to be positive. Calls for service to the schools have been increasing over the years. Here again, this is a testament to the need and value of the program. Set aside the current pandemic outbreak, we would forecast that need to be over 3,000 calls for service to the school years, up by nearly a third from its 2017 levels. Again, greater engagement and coordination between law enforcement and school officers is clear, while the severity of the incidents and total arrests remain low, and the school district and officers focus on diversionary outcomes, a practice that has become consistent all the way through the community, not just with SROs. For each successful diversion or low-level probationary outcome, a student and a family is saved from the long-term effects of a juvenile arrest. Lastly, and most difficult to provide you with a quantitative answer, is the mental health of our schools. Law enforcement officers on campuses provide a healthy feeling of safety and security, not within quantitative measures. Prior to the implementation of the SRO program here in Carson City, the response to school district calls for service was managed by the department's priorities based on dispatching mechanisms, and there was little engagement otherwise. Today, there is responsive protections in place to the maximum extent possible. This alone has proven to be valued by students, faculties, and expressed school district members as well, and certainly by myself.
Okay. So would you say that the school resource officer program has been successful or not?
I would absolutely, both as my kids went to school here, my grandchildren go to school here. I thought about how nice it would have been to bring my granddaughter in here. She happens to be one of the Mark Twain students that's going up to Carson Middle School next year. Parents all the way across this community express some level of fears as students go in from their elementary school environments to the middle schools. That's a very, very big challenge in this community. I think, as I've always said in the past, our target audience should be our middle schools. Middle schools is when our children break out into the most severe of social circumstances and change in their lives. If we don't pay attention to our middle school environments, then you can't very well bang on the kids in the upper levels of your high schools and so on. I think middle schools is the primary zone for services, but we are challenged. Our weakest link is our capacity for real effective resources. I can tell you firsthand that Nevada is suffering in the area of juvenile services for the most challenged students. And very often those circumstances or those things that pop up to our attention first come up or are first exposed in the middle school age environment.
Okay. Questions of the sheriff? Chief Jones?
Kenny, on the school still has security. I don't know what they call them. So do they, used to be Orlando Sanchez, that position. Do they still have those positions?
What's that?
Does the school still have security positions?
They still have.
And I don't know what they call them, that's why I'm asking.
Right. They still have folks that work alongside us, but I believe some of those have been rolled back.
Okay, I was just curious how.
I think that they've been rolled back to allow for funding resources, better funding resources in cooperation with the city to provide officers on the schools rather than non-officer security people.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask. I have more comments. Give me a second.
Oh, it's okay.
I appreciate your report. I think when we had our joint meeting and we asked you to present a report, and we recognize the challenge of all of those things that you mentioned because of the timing and everything else. But I appreciate what you put together. I think it was a very good report. I think it gives us a good picture. And I'd really like to see language added to this agreement on page 6 that adds a paragraph requiring that reporting be done at least annually, whether that be to the two bodies or whether that be individual. I think I've crafted some language which I'll suggest, but ideally, I think it would be great to have that done at a joint meeting and that be an agenda or an action item at our joint meeting so that we can provide input to both you and the school district as governing bodies on what we'd like to see. And just as an example, the conversation you and I had about the truancy issue where you expressed to me that that's sort of handled at a school level and it isn't sort of collated up at a district level. I mean, it's not for us to say to the school district how they should do it, but it seems to me that that should be something that at some point we'd like to roll up. So if we have it on our agendas at these meetings where we can actually take action instead of just listening, I think we can, try and make some headway. So first, thank you for the documents and the information. And secondly, I'm going to read my suggested language into the record now if the mayor will allow me to do that. Sorry about the feedback. I would add on page 6 of 12 a section called SRO Program Reporting, and I'd propose it to say the parties agree to describe program effectiveness by providing an annual report to be presented to the Carson City School Board and to the Carson City Board of Supervisors at either a joint meeting or during individual meetings. I didn't have any other comments. Thank you.
Supervisor Barrett.
Thank you. First, let me assure the sheriff I'm not here dressed this way for a stick-up, so you don't have to arrest me. You probably know who I am anyway. Secondarily, I appreciated your presentation, and it was mostly on the effectiveness of the program as much as you could go into. For the record, I would hope that you could also supply us a quick rundown of the background regarding the funding. As you already have indicated, it's about half and half between the school district and us. Does any of that come out of the general fund? How much?
It all comes from the general fund.
That's what I thought.
215,000.
Yeah, that's what I understood. Are these deputies paid in excess of other deputies because they're in a special? I didn't think so. That's what I was assured of. Finally, let me tell my colleagues that ineffectively, I'm here wearing this not because I think I'm going to prevent myself from getting coronavirus, but in case I'm 20 or 25% of the asymptomatic carriers, I don't want you all to get my spittle on anything. So that's the reason I'm here this way. I wish I had a more effective one. Thank you.
Well, let me tell you, John, you and I talk about old age quite a bit. I was pleasantly surprised to see that this guy, Fauci, who was the head guy there, he's 79 years old. He looks like he's 50. He's jumping around all over the place. Wonder how he does that. It's like Bunkowski here. He's
Probably in
jumping
better
around
shape
too,
than
man.
I am.
But they got to get him a box to stand on, because when he
Well,
talks
sure,
after
guy.
the president, all you see is microphone. They got to get him something to stand on.
Well, they don't want to give him anything to shoot at either, because I guess he's having a little security issues. So, yes, sir.
I would like to bring up one other topic that Supervisor Jomi and I spoke about, the reporting mechanisms. They're very, very challenging, as we said up front, because all of these information bases, the databases that we access, and the periods and times of the years are challenging. Traditionally, I think, Mr. Mayor, we have met basically at the beginning of the calendar year timeframe as a joint board, and right about at the end of the school year timeframe. That end of the year school timeframe doesn't allow us to collect a lot of the information that we pull together as we move into the next school year, and I would kind of throw it over here at Stacy.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that, but I think along with my suggested language amendment on the agreement, that we suggest to staff that we move our meetings to different times, particularly August for the one meeting, because that either the last meeting in August or the first in September, and then whatever 6 months ends up being beyond that, because then the sheriff can work with the statistics and pull data together and have it pertinent to at least the school year. So I think that is something that I would ask staff. Thanks, Kenny.
Other questions? Lori.
So just in general comment, again, thank you so much for bringing data. I know that it's a challenge, but I find it completely necessary for the public to understand the need for the program, and frankly, me too, right? Data helps us form our decisions. So I'm interested a little bit in what Stacy's amendment is, but I think I'm looking in paragraph 8, that's actually on page 5, that talks about the effectiveness. And are you suggesting an addition in 8, adding that reporting will occur?
Yes,
During?
I'm
Okay, so
suggesting.
to the bottom of paragraph 8?
Yeah, I'm suggesting on page 6, there would be number 9, and then they would be successively numbered. It would be a separate paragraph titled SRO Program Reporting. SRO Program Reporting.
Because one of the questions that I had asked from the DA's office yesterday, was I didn't think that really when I read through this agreement that all the authority, I didn't see that we had any authority to receive any information. So kind of going along with what Mr. Giomi's stating, I think we can ask the DA's office to formulate good language to make sure that this can be publicly, because when you read it, it looks like it's between the school district and the sheriff's office, and there'd be no public information back to us, but this was great. And if this is what you intended, you're on the right track.
You folks are probably right, and Danny's probably got his hand reaching for the button. All you have to do is ask and we'll present it. I don't think that there is any problem whatsoever. In fact, as I said in the very beginning, for policymakers, this is a very, very good presentation to have.
Yeah.
It keeps you update on the programs that are in place, but more importantly, it keeps you updated as to the weak links in the programs. A lot has changed since our juvenile justice facilities were built back in the, I think, 70s or so. And the way we manage our kids following that contact with law enforcement has changed dramatically. We look for kids to be in their desks at school learning and feeling as if they're inclusive to that educational environment. But that's not always true. And traditionally, we see that law enforcement is behind that curve responding to the incidents. The SRO program does not say that we're not going to have a problem. What it does suggest is that we have people and resources in place that are qualified and ready to respond to any incident. It provides more efficient and rapid response, but I think policymakers need to be aware. So even if there were no change to the agenda item, I would suggest we would do this anyways.
Well, and my, my suggestion with this was not to be so specific that we couldn't update that report. And I didn't want to delineate to you what should be in the report, because I think those things may change over time.
Yeah, just to kind of jump in on this discussion here. And I want to know for the record that the attorney from my office that actually was really in the trenches on preparing this agreement for the parties is standing outside. That's Todd Reese. And he'll jump in and correct me if I'm saying anything incorrectly. Based on my reading of this paragraph 8 here on page 5 of 12, what we really have to keep in mind is that, this provision relates to the two parties of the agreement. Those two parties it's Carson City, meaning it's the governing body of Carson City, which is this board, and then also the school district. So in effect, when we have language included in the contract that requires the parties to establish objective criteria to measure the effectiveness of the SRO program, and then it enumerates the list of criteria that would be examined, I mean, in essence, what that's providing already is a sharing agreement of that information to be provided to both parties. Otherwise, you can't really measure it as to the parties if the parties aren't able to actually view those, established measured criteria. I don't disagree, however, with Supervisor Jomey's suggestion that perhaps for clarifying purposes, we can add an additional clause in there that would just expand on this idea that definitively, yes, in addition to this list of criteria that has to be provided, what we're going to do is annually at least provide a report, or at least this information in report form for purposes of analyzation, or analysis by, either party. So again, I believe Todd's watching outside and he'll jump in and correct me if, my understanding of this draft is incorrect, but that's my interpretation of this language.
Okay. Brad, Supervisor Bukowski.
Sheriff, a question for you on if we were to have an active shooter situation in one of the schools resource officers do not carry weapons. So who's the first responder in that situation? Is it the school resource officer, or do they call for other officers?
All of the above. All of our school resource officers are equipped and ready to respond to any incident on or off the campus, as well as all of our patrol divisions. We have had circumstances, thank you very much to the community, that have required or necessitated heavy responses to our schools. And in each of those, we evaluate. All of our school resource officers are equally equipped and prepared as our patrol officers are. And I would like to thank the school district on that, because it did require a little bit of modification to some areas to make sure that our equipment was safe.
Okay. Anybody else? Dan?
Mayor, yeah, I'd like to just add one more thing, just for the benefit of everyone in this room and also to the public. This paragraph 8 here that I was referencing earlier, of course, it specifically identifies certain juvenile information. And as we all know, statutorily, certain juvenile information is confidential as a matter of law. I don't see anything in here that's enumerated in paragraph 8 that jumps out as being confidential information per statute that would not, be able to be revealed. And I guess I would just mention that in terms of preparing this additional paragraph or clause for inclusion in this agreement, we would make sure that we craft the language in such a manner that it would not, tend to violate or potentially violate any statute where confidentiality has to be maintained.
Okay. Got it. Other questions?
And
Brad?
Dan, isn't that covered under number 9, information sharing, where it says notwithstanding any other provisions, the sharing of information will follow the protocols in accordance with Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act? Or are you going above and beyond that?
Yeah, I did identify, that paragraph 9, and that does reference specifically FERPA. I guess what I'm saying is, I just wanted to give assurance to the board and also to the members of the public that, when we modify any language in here, we'll take a holistic approach and make sure that we've captured, all the confidentiality requirements, that might be essential. So we'll reference those GV statutes if need be, but we probably don't really need to get into detail like that.
Okay, go.
And then, so this is really going to become our master agreement for how we handle the SRO program. So while the costs indicated here in, say, 3 to 4%, we currently have 2 officers that are on a grant that the school district has. So this particular agreement, it could also be subject to those 2 once the grant ends. Is that correct? So I just want the public to understand there's potentially 2 more or however many more we ever authorize for the program, that this is the master agreement.
That is probably the best point, because you're rolling the clock back about 8-12 months. The reason that this grant is so important and why the details are so important is because with those 2 additional officers, the previous grant had expired. A new grant was being submitted for. The school district is required to report on that grant. We had to come before you to authorize the FTE positions that were placed in. So this has been a continuous block program for quite some time that the DA's office has been working on very diligently as a result of that split in there.
All right. Anybody else? We okay on this? Somebody want to try a motion? We'll see where we go. Chief, you want to try a motion?
I move to approve the agreement as presented with the direction to staff to add language in the appropriate location in the agreement to allow for annual reporting to the governing bodies. Does that cover it, Dan?
Yes.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. This discussion's in order. Supervisor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm hesitant because of the cost of this, but I'm not hesitant because twice in my career as a journalist, I was an emergency service reporter, covered my hometown police and fire, and then later in Lincoln, Nebraska, did the same in my 50s. And there's a lot more to law enforcement than people realize. I think the sheriff has covered it quite well, forming relationships, mentoring, all the rest of it that goes with it, and being ready and have a pipeline into the institution, in this case the schools, is very helpful. In addition, I served for time on the Nebraska Parole Board and saw things from the offender's eyes, inmates' eyes, looking out, and they require the same kind of mentoring, and so I'm going to vote for this. I'm sure we probably all are, but I want the public to understand that this is not just money thrown at something because we're afraid there might be an active shooter come to the high school or anything like that, although that's included. to be on the ground at the time, but it's also because there are things that you cannot quantify that come out of this that go a long way, that you'll never see and you'll never get in a report. Am I correct, Sheriff? Thank you.
All right. I think, is Superintendent Stokes still on the line? What do you do?
Dizzy, do we have anyone on the line still, like Superintendent Stokes?
Yes, it looks like Richard is still in the room. Would you like me to add him?
Well, I want to add him, and then I want to ask him if he's got anything to say about this.
Yes,
I mean, I
can you
probably
add
shouldn't
him?
overlook it because it's a two-part agreement. Richard, are you up there?
Supervisor Stokes is now in the room.
He's not supervisor.
Oh, gosh.
Sorry. I obviously can't speak for Mr. Stokes, but he and I speak very regularly, around the clock. I think he kind of takes a deep breath every time he sees my caller ID come up on his phone.
Particularly when it comes up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I want to go just for a moment, Mr. Mayor, just to show you the support of the programs.
Supervisor. Your
You got him?
supervisor. Your supervisor.
This most recent event that took place, the shooting that took place, Mr. Stokes and I were on the phone speaking within minutes of it occurring. He had suspicions at the very onset. While it took us hours to get to our suspects, Mr. Stokes was able to give us information from a school district level, from a school environment level, persons that were involved. So that exchange of information between the school district and the sheriff's office has just been invaluable.
Well, Richard, the reason I wanted you to come back in here, did you hear the motion that we're discussing here? Richard, did you hear it?
Mr. Mayor, is that you?
Pardon me? Yeah, did you hear what
This
Chief
is Richard
Jody added?
Stokes.
Yeah. Are you okay?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question or the statement that Sheriff Furlong made.
He talked nice about you. What I'd like to have you relate, if you can, I mean, you're sort of a counterparty to this agreement. Did you hear what Chief Jomey added to the agreement, to the MOU?
I'm sorry, I did not. I've got another event going on that I'm kind of half on and half off, so.
All right, well, take it from an old school board member, you should be okay with it.
Okay. I trust certainly Sheriff Furlong and I trust you folks, but I just want to add my appreciation for all of the good that happens in our school district because of the SRO program. Given just the consideration for school safety, our students, our parents, our teachers, everyone feels so much safer having our school resource officers available. And if you think about just having the number of students at any of our schools, there's a large group of individuals there at any one time, groups of our citizens. In addition to the students, we also have volunteers, parents on campus, and 201. They feel well supported and safe because of what's going on through the support of Sheriff Furlong. Day or night, weekend or regular work days, Sheriff Furlong contacts me regularly when there are issues going on, and we have a tremendous working relationship, and would really hate to lose that. So for whatever it's worth, I would wholeheartedly encourage you to vote yes on this to maintain our relationship and this program.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, any further discussion on the motion? Supervisor Bunkowski, go.
I'd just like to, while you're online here, Richard, the language that Supervisor Giommi is proposing to add is a requirement that a similar report to the one that we heard today is presented to both governing bodies at least annually.
Just in any way I could with that.
I told you you'd be okay with that. I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you, Richard. All right, further discussion? Hearing none on the motion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried, okay, all right. That completes that part. Let's go on to, we now have the addition. City Manager, do you want to take us through this? What's going on here? I mean, I think all of us have some ideas that we want to present to you, so.
Yes, I just wanted to go over a few things that we've been working on, and then the Health Department and the EOC, there's representatives from, that will come in and speak about those, the health, as it relates to the Health Department and the EOC, and then also the sheriff will be here too if there's any questions for him. So the first thing, in response to the governor's latest directive that came out yesterday, we've extended the city's telework policy through April 30th. We've also, HR has been working with our office and the DA's office to create a policy and procedures for the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That lines out the additional 80 hours of sick leave that employees will be entitled to under various scenarios, and then also some extended FMLA leave. HR has also begun processing unemployment claims that we've been receiving. We've been in communication with the Porter Group regarding the relief acts that are coming down from the federal government. We've been working with the CTA and they're putting stuff on their Visit Carson City website, and we've also been feeding information to the chamber so that they can get that out to the businesses in the community. Porter Group is also trying to schedule a meeting with us and the mayor to have a phone conference with our Nevada delegates. Rachel Snyder, you've probably seen our website. She's doing an amazing job keeping the city website current and organized with, the most up-to-date COVID information for businesses and just for the community and also for our employees. The DA's office and the sheriff's office took the lead in responding to citizens and businesses with inquiries regarding what the essential businesses and what the non-essential businesses are. When it first came out, there wasn't a lot of detailed explanation, and since then, additional guidance has come out, and we've posted that on our website also. And the sheriff's office is working to educate anyone that may be operating outside of that directive. IT has been working tirelessly to keep our teleworking applications running smoothly, and definitely we'll be working on, for our next board meeting, how to make the WebEx work better. We did test it quite a bit yesterday and the day before, but we have IT people that we're working with on testing it, and of course they know exactly how the programs work. So so we'll work on that for the next meeting. Let's see, Alternative Sentencing is conducting formal probation, misdemeanor treatment court, mental health court, and the third DUI diversion monthly reporting for April. They're doing that by phone, fax, and email. Let's see, daily counts at the courthouse. The courthouse is still open, but the daily counts went from about 500 people a day in the building to now just 150. So they're trying to reduce the number of people that are going in and out of there. Public Works is also business as usual for all the field operations. The Water Division has started their spring flushing program, and you could see a video of that with Eddie Quiglieri online on our at carson.org. The capital projects, all of those staff are working from home. The capital construction projects are going forward full steam. Some of the silver lining in this whole thing, and making the most out of the lighter than usual traffic on the streets. So the South Carson Street project is ahead of schedule just based on the reduction of the traffic that's going down that corridor now. The Jack bus service continues. Let's see, community development is close to walk-in services, but they continue to process permits through the online system. The building division is still reviewing new permit plans and conducting inspections. And the business license staff, it has worked out good for our Tyler implementation. They're working on catching up with all the business license renewals. And one last thing, the senior center, they're serving about 80 to 100 meals daily by doing a kind of a drive-up to-go meal for the seniors. And they also added, are going to add a flyer. I think Supervisor Bagwell talked about that. They added a flyer to give information to the seniors. So that's all that I had. And then I could have, if you guys have any questions for me or.
Well, I think, maybe it's just me, but I think we could all use a little bit more information coming out of health.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be nice to be able to have an end of day or a first thing in the morning report about, how many tests were conducted yesterday, how many tested positive, how many didn't test positive, how many test kits did we use, how many do we have on order? I mean, are we going to run out of those? I think the board should have that type of information daily if we can. It doesn't, if it doesn't change, just rerun the report. But I think we all need to know from the health what's going on there.
Okay. And just for the public too, we do have a press release. They've changed it. It goes out at 10 a.m. daily just to talk about any new positives. I think we're going to be able to start getting information out on those that have recovered from the virus. So that will be good news.
I get that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and we'll do this in
understand from our
addition.
standpoint, by the time the 10 o'clock press release comes out, we're getting phone calls and we haven't heard anything from health. That's why I'm asking. Okay, I think maybe nobody's having the same problem I have, but I think health has to be more engaged. I mean, I know they're out there doing what they're doing, with the coronavirus stuff, what they should be doing. But I think they have to do a little bit more on one, keeping their board of health, I guess, and this board up to date on what's going on. Some firm data that we could see daily. It doesn't have to be written, it can be an email or whatever, you want to do it. Also, I know that Ms. Russell is taking care of the budget, she's looking at that. When is that we're gonna bring that back for discussion?
That was scheduled to come at the next meeting. I was going to have her call, based on the governor's directive, I think not yesterday, but the day before. Well, Dan is going to answer.
I won't get into too much detail on the record with Nancy about that. We did have a discussion yesterday about one of the more recent declarations issued from the governor's office, and that was, I think, directive number 9, I want to say, and that was in relation to the suspension or tolling of time with respect to the commencement of certain proceedings under statutory deadlines and other rules and regulations. That has since been revised as of, I believe, this morning. So there's a revised declaration that clarifies that that was not intended to mean that everything under statute is tolled. It's only tolling with respect to statutes of limitations.
Only tolled for what?
For statutes of limitations.
Statutory?
Statutes of limitations, Mayor. So there was a little bit of ambiguity, upon the initial release.
The first word that came out was they were going to extend that by 90 days, and that's gone now?
That's the other provision that relates to business licensing. I'm speaking specifically with regard to the filing and the commencement of actions, including motions, any other notices under law.
Okay, so that's district court stuff then. How about the local stuff? I mean, are we still under a requirement that we're going to have to give an extension of time for our permits and our licenses, business licenses and building permits, et cetera? Do we still do that or not?
Mayor, I want to take a couple of minutes and review that language that came out again this morning. I don't want to speak off the cuff.
Yeah.
What I wanted to address for purpose of the record was specifically what Nancy was speaking to, which was, I think she was going to go down the line of, we're going to have Sherry Finance speak with the Department of Taxation to see if they're reading the initial version of that declaration to mean also that there's going to be a suspension of the statutory deadline for purposes of budgeting for local government. And all I was saying was, for clarity of the record, because in light of the governor's revised version of that declaration issued earlier this morning, it clearly says that was not the intent of the governor's office. What they actually intended to do was simply to toll the time for statute of limitations purposes. So now, with respect to the local, issue of business licensing and permits, I haven't had a chance to read that second part of the revised version, so I don't want to speak off the cuff. I'll make sure that the district attorney and myself re-review that, and we'll provide you with any information that's necessary, just to update you.
While you're talking there, how are we getting along? Are you guys coordinating with the AG, state AG, on some of this stuff? Do they talk to you? And don't, I'm not getting into the politics, but I'd like to know that whether or not, some of these big issues that are coming out, it'd be nice if the AG could, at least give us somewhat of a heads up that this is coming down the pike. Because as soon as the governor says something, our phone's ringing off the hook.
I think that's a great question. I'll probably have to defer an answer to Jason, the district attorney. I haven't personally, as the assistant DA, been in contact with the AG's office. I do know that from time to time, the Attorney General's office does communicate with Jason and my office. I know, for example, we received a memorandum not too long ago, informing us of their interpretation with respect to one of the governor's emergency declarations and how that applies to the conduct of public meetings. I know that there have been some other communications between our office and the AG's office as well. As far as I know, that's not a daily or a standing sort of a communication effort. But again, I want to defer that to my boss, to Jason, the DA.
Are we going to leave the EOC open until this is over?
Yes. And just another thing on the budget, I think what the plan, now that we know that we do need to move forward, is at the April 16th meeting, Finance has done some pretty significant cuts in the budgets. At this point, I think when she presents it at the next meeting, we've reduced, we had set aside $1 million for supplemental requests. That is down to zero at this point. I'm just winging it with the amount of capital was around $7 million for just general government capital. That looks like it's being reduced down to about 1.6 million. So we're not going to bring a capital plan at the next meeting. Sherry will do a presentation and we'll get direction from the board as far as how we want to move forward with the budget. If we want to keep 1.6 million for capital, which capital, which areas would we want to fund? Or do we want to fund some supplemental requests? So she'll bring a bunch of different scenarios for you guys at the next meeting.
Yeah, jump.
So Nancy, one of the things that I'd like to have when this comes to us at the next meeting is staff recommendations or department head recommendations on capital improvement projects that are scheduled but not yet begun, so that we can have an informed discussion on whether or not we should be pushing those projects back or just deferring them altogether to save funds.
I think that ought to apply to the water rate increase as well.
Yes, and we can talk about that at the next meeting, whether or not we want to move forward with those rate increases.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think it's important to do. I think it's important. Let's leave it like that. I don't want to break the open meeting law. Okay, anything else that you think we ought to have?
Yeah, can I bring something up? I had someone call me that apparently some jurisdictions in the state are, easing or modifying under emergency order the ability for restaurants to sell liquor out of their doors. In other words, right now, so some jurisdictions are apparently allowing a restaurant to, if they have a beer and wine license, to sell beer and wine and deliver it to your car or sell it on a takeout basis. And this individual asked me if they thought that was something we would consider. So I didn't get a chance to ask anybody about it because I got a call last night. So I just throw that out there. I don't know
that
how
we can do that.
Huh?
I don't know that we have the authority to do that. I mean, this is the governor's.
Well, at least 2 other jurisdictions are doing it.
Yeah, sometimes our jurisdictions don't understand the rule of law.
I agree. I'm not saying that it can or can't be done, and I didn't get a chance to ask Dan this because, as I said, the call came to me last night, so I just would like to know if, without doing a whole lot of, the person brought up Henderson specifically, and I think the other one might have been North Las Vegas. So I don't know if he could, just do a 10-minute or 15-minute dive on that. It'd be appreciated.
I think Ronnie Hanneman, the chamber's gonna have a town hall on this next week,
On alcohol? On alcohol specifically?
virtual town hall,
Specifically on alcohol?
virtual town hall.
Yeah, on what? On alcohol?
No, not on alcohol, on the.
Oh,
on
okay.
all this stuff going on here. Mostly on the, the governor's directives that have come out. I understood, that, I don't know, Dan, do you know if that rule, if you sell food, you can take food out to the curb and also drinks? I didn't hear that you could take drinks out to the curb alone.
Honestly, Mayor, I don't remember a specific provision
All right.
in that emergency regulation that addresses curbside pickup or delivery of alcoholic beverages. I mean, I mean, for better or worse, and I understand, I certainly don't mean to, undermine or diminish the amount of work that went into that emergency regulation. It was, it was quick and hard, and they had to get it out. However, it's also an emergency regulation, meaning that it didn't go through the full vetting process like normal agency regulations would through the Legislative Council Bureau and then the Legislative Commission. There's a little bit of language in there that I would say is ambiguous, perhaps a little bit vague. So that makes it difficult for us local governments to fully be able to interpret with mathematical certainty exactly what this means.
Well, I think if you have a talk with the AG, and maybe all of us here would, I can do that. Tell them, you're making certain things a crime under 205. You can't have lack of clarity if you're charging somebody with a crime. So, if we gotta fix it, you gotta fix it. Okay? But I think, just because we're in a hurry, I mean, I'll let it go at that.
Can I bring up one other administrative item related to COVID? And the mayor knows a little bit about this, but there is some federal funding that's coming down from the feds to local governments and state governments. And so League of Cities and NACO are both working with our city manager and other equivalents around the state to come up with recommending a distribution formula. The feds have sort of said how much money goes to the state and how much money will go to local governments, and the vast majority of, I think Nevada's getting 1.25 million. I think 600,000 or more of that is going to the state, and the remaining will go to local governments. And it's that local government portion that NACO and League of Cities are working on, trying to figure out a distribution formula that's hopefully something other than, at the mayor's and my recommendation, hopefully something other than a straight population distribution, but maybe more along the lines of lost sales tax or distribution based off of actual loss. So that's what we're encouraging both of those bodies to push forward. Whether someone will follow that recommendation or not, who knows? Yeah. But I think the state will look to NACO and League of Cities.
It will.
Mayor.
And I think, I don't know if you said 1.25 million with an M or billion with a B. I think it's a billion.
Yeah, I might have said million, but it's billion, yeah.
Okay, I got it. All right.
Yeah, 600 million, 658 million to state and 480 or 5 something to local governments.
Right.
And Clark County, I think, is the only one that would receive a direct distribution. The rest of us have to go
That's in
through
the
the
law, I
state.
think.
And also the Porter Group is working with them as well.
Yeah. I've had two calls that seem to be coming on, probably everybody's got the same ones. People are seeing people out on a golf course. And it's hard to, people want to know, why is the golf course open? It's declared to be a non-essential business. Well, the regulation carves out, it says you can't do anything with the clubhouse, but you can do outside activities. I mean, specifically carved out in that regulation. I don't know how they're doing that.
Single cart.
Huh?
They're doing
They're doing single cart, one person out so that they can keep the social
And
distancing
I've
rules.
golfed with someone and we each, instead of sharing a cart, we each had our own cart. So.
What
and
happens
there-
if, when you're done, if you go in the clubhouse, who goes in the clubhouse?
I don't go in the clubhouse. One of us in our party, one went into the clubhouse and paid. That's what they're, so the golf courses, if you have a foursome, each get a cart, one of the foursome goes in to pay.
Okay.
And, you know, they're doing takeout only, and then, like, I wiped the cart down, my personal cart, I wiped it down before I, you know, I think the other thing it's important to mention for people to realize, because I've had several questions, not only about that, but why are trails open, why, you know, the order to close wasn't issued by local government. I mean, our local government has not issued any orders to close. And I don't know, as a member of this governing body, whether I would support doing that. I don't know that we're in a position to do that in the current environment. I guess I could see scenarios where it might happen, but presently, you know, we're following the governor's directive.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, you're exactly right, Supervisor Giomi. I mean, there's nothing that's been issued from local government, from Carson City, from the district attorney's office, from this body, this board. And when we're sort of left at the mercy of, you know, the language that's coming out of state government. That being said, you know, I do want to make it clear, you know, for the benefit of the public, for anyone who may be listening in right now, that, you know, the district attorney's office, we're trying to provide, you know, as many services in these challenging and sort of, you know, weird, ambiguous times as possible. We do receive calls on almost a daily basis from local business owners in Carson City asking whether or not their business constitutes an essential or non-essential operation. We also get calls from other members of the community who want to field or issue complaints. You know, they're sort of going around town and they see that some businesses are operating and some are not. There's a lot of confusion that's out there. And so the DA's office, we're trying to do what we can. Now, obviously, we cannot, you know, represent members of the public. We don't have a relationship with them in that sense. There's no attorney-client privilege, you know, sort of a relationship, and so we can't provide legal advice. What we do, though, however, is we direct them to where they can obtain a copy of the emergency regulation, and then we tell them what is the best interpretation or opinion of the DA's office coming from the district attorney himself. With the caveat, however, that, you know, we're going to urge you not to rely on our interpretation, because you got to understand this is not legal advice that we're giving to you. However, we don't want to just turn them away and say, we can't talk to you at all. I mean, I think that would really be a disservice. So, you know, Jason, the DA, has certainly made it a point of his administration and his office to reach out to members of the community, and we've got all of our phone lines open. So when the community does call in, we're happy to engage. And of course, as Nancy pointed out earlier, you know, we're definitely in sync and collaborating with the sheriff's office. We're on the phone with him very frequently, and he's going out there and he's in the trenches and he's monitoring these businesses that we're getting complaints on. So it's, again, a lot of confusion out there, and we certainly empathize with the public. It's confusing even for us attorneys. There are a lot of floating parts out there. They don't all quite fit. As of this morning, we now have 10 emergency declarations plus one additional revised declaration. So we have a total of 11 declarations, and we're constantly trying to figure out how all that fits together and how it works in conjunction with the language and the emergency regulation. So a lot of times when we do get these phone calls or these types of questions about, well, how is it that this owner is able to operate and this owner is not? That analysis is driven very frequently by a fact-by-fact specific basis. You have to kind of understand, well, how is this person licensed? What exactly are they selling? What exactly are they doing? How are they conducting their business? We have to dig a little bit deeper, and we try to do that so that we can, again, provide, you know, the best sort of not advice, but recommendations to the members of the public. And then, of course, we advise that, you know, if you're able to, reach out to your own counsel as well.
You know, and I would just add, to further complicate things, that the various licensing bodies in the state also are out developing emergency regulations that are beyond those 11 that you've talked about. So the dental board is issuing emergency regulations, the medical board is issuing emergency regulations. So it is confusing. It is.
Are auto dealers now allowed to sell cars as well as to operate their repair shop?
It's my understanding that a lot of them are out there operating. Now, again, based on that very specific language, in ambiguous terms, if that's sort of an oxymoron there, I know that service shops are allowed to continue to operate. That's pretty clear under the regulation. So if you're a body shop, you're a service shop at a dealership, you can continue to maintain operations. I'd have to look at the language a little bit more carefully to see if, our office would have an interpretation on whether or not the sales side of things could continue to operate. It is my understanding that, there are different interpretations out there. Some dealers are operating on the sales side and some are not. Again, off the cuff, I don't have that regulation in front of me today, unfortunately, but I can say very, with certainty that, servicing of vehicles, those types of services can be offered and can continue as an essential operation.
I think it'd be helpful if, when you cross that bridge, to let us know what's on the other side of the bridge so that we can answer those questions as well.
We'd be happy to do that, Mayor.
All right. All right, any other questions or suggestions to our?
I'd like to make one comment that's certainly outside our purview. I made a comment 2 weeks ago that I hope it wasn't interpreted that I had admiration for the Chinese system. Last night on public broadcasting, I saw a story out of Taiwan where they have like 359 cases because they were ahead of the curve on this. This country, because we're self-governing, has been, let's put it politely, been behind the curve, and we're going to probably stay behind the curve. All of our health officials who've talked on this have talked about sheltering in place. Our governor has talked about sheltering in place, but we are a self-governing system. I urge everyone to consider the fact that we now know 25%, probably more, are asymptomatic characters. We are likely to find ourselves in a situation where 75% or more of our population are affected by this, not peripherally, but directly in the sense that they are carriers or actually get it. So I'm recommending as much as I can that we shelter in place as much as we can. I understand businesses are in a bind. Our entire economy will be in a bind, as Supervisor Bonkowski pointed out last week, and I echoed him then. We're going to have a heck of a problem for the next 6 weeks to 6 months. So I join the governor in saying, stay home for Nevada.
Okay. Yes, Nancy.
I was next. If you didn't have any more questions for me, I was going to have the health / EOC come do a presentation.
Okay, let's see how they do.
Okay. And I'm going to step out of the room so that we avoid the more than 9 individuals in the room.
More than 10. More than 10. You can stay. Huh? Oh, let's take a break. We'll come back in 5 minutes. All right. We'll be in recess for 5 minutes. 10 minutes, whatever you want to do.
One at a time. Go, John.
we're still on the emergency item. We got the EOC folks here. Tom and Nikki, go. Who's going to go first? The men in blue, the man in blue, okay.
Tom Ra, Deputy Emergency Manager, Battalion Chief with Fire Department. Is that better? Okay. So for the record, Tom Ra, Battalion Chief with the Fire Department, Deputy Emergency Manager. I am currently serving as the IC for the COVID incident that the EOC is supporting. Just a brief update for you on our EOC itself. We started this whole process probably about 5 weeks ago when the health activated their department operations center. And the emergency management office supported health through their dock for a couple of weeks. And on the 11th of March, we activated the EOC fully. We moved into our EOC over at Station 51. Quickly outgrew that within a week, and that's why we're here at the community center now. Our mission is to support health and health services to the Quad County at this time. So we're actually kind of a model EOC in that we're representing 4 counties out of the EOC here in the community center. That would be Story, Lyon, Douglas, and Carson. Health has services in each one of the counties, so our support to them is with all 4. The declaration of emergency actually gave us a little bit more freedom of movement. It allowed us to start using the state EOC as a resource for us to ask for supplies and equipment and other resources as needed for our Quad County EOC. At this time, we're in full activation. You've probably seen most of the EOC as you came in today. We're over on the other side of the community center. The organization is a Type 3 IMT, Incident Management Team, that's running the EOC at this time. Our operations to date include supporting health, supporting a joint information center out of the EOC, and a call center, which has become very important to the residents of the whole Quad Counties. They are providing information to all of the citizens with call requests averaging in the 70 to 100 range per day. And their operation is from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then 8 to 5 Saturday and Sunday also, so 7 days a week. We also put together a donation management and distribution system. We realize that folks out there want to help and may be able to donate medical supplies and equipment that would be needed by healthcare facilities and EMS agencies throughout the Quad Counties. The Salvation Army has graciously taken on that role on and is cataloging and acquiring donations for the Quad County EOC. The EOC also, through our logistics branch, has put together a distribution program for supplies throughout the Quad County, whether it be masks, gowns, eye protection, gloves, whatever the needs be or the requests that come in, they've provided that distribution center. So all in all, we are working together as 4 counties. The state's watching us as a model program throughout the state. Other counties are trying to join and do something similar. And I'm talking about maybe the smaller rural counties. But a successful program at this point.
Tom, how are we doing on test equipment here? And can you say that? Can you tell us? Or is that confidential information?
No, but I think Nikki has better numbers for you, and I'd like to let her answer that,
Okay,
if
while
that's
we're
all
on
right.
you, I just got an email from Kelly Nevis. Everybody remembers Kelly. She's a code enforcement officer. She has 15 masks that she wants to donate or could donate. I don't know who to turn her over to. Are you?
Any of the donations can be given to the Salvation Army,
Salvation Army?
and they are putting together a resource catalog list for us of what they got, and then the EOC will distribute that to people that need it.
All right, very good.
Can I ask Tom a question?
Yes, I'm sorry,
Tom, is the EOC staffed with then members from all of the Quad County governing agencies? So it's not just Carson City employees who are staffing ICS positions in the
Correct.
EOC?
Each county has provided personnel for the EOC.
Okay.
And we continue that rotation throughout
Right.
Each county. So everybody's putting in their fair share. It's actually a really good teamwork between the counties.
Could board members go and visit the EOC? Are you okay with board members visiting the EOC?
Of course we are. We will provide social distancing for you. And yeah, I'd love for you guys to come over and see the operation if you have
Take the
time.
temperature first?
Once you're already in the building, I think that's a moot point at this time.
Okay, Tom. All right, Ms. Aker, Nikki, go.
Okay, for the record, Nikki Aker, Director, Carson City Health and Human Services. You asked about testing. So all over the whole nation, there is a shortage of testing materials. We are following the CDC priority listing of who can be tested. So individuals will call the call center, they'll get pre-screened, then be referred to the nursing call center if looks like they may qualify for testing. And we have arranged for testing at the health department. We are getting supplies from the Nevada Public Health State Lab.
Supplies of what?
For testing, so the swabs, and then the vial that the swabs will go into for transport. There are other entities that are swabbing within our area. You know, we've got the hospital, we've got healthcare entities down in Douglas County. So there are other entities besides us that are testing.
So here's the question. I don't know if you can answer this or not, but do we have sufficient tests? Do we have sufficient PPE here, including tests? I know tests aren't PPE, in Carson City and in the 4 counties to handle what are expected or what could be expected in terms of contagion?
So, again, based on that criteria.
What criteria are you talking about?
That's the CDC criteria for testing. We are not doing community-based testing
Who are you
at this
testing?
point. So they need to fit within that criteria. At this point, we have had sufficient supplies for the individuals that fit the criteria. PPE, we have been requesting from the state different PPE such as gowns. We have had a supply of N95 masks come in. So, we're seeing that the hospitals, they are being resourceful in their PPE use. But we have not, at this point, had a big cry out that someone does not have it. But that's not to say that it's happening out there, but
we are trying to supply as many as we can. And Stacy, you may have a different view of it being a healthcare provider.
Yeah, I can talk from the private sector, and yeah, we are in desperate need of PPE. There is insufficient PPE to do what we need to do. We are asking our staff, and I'm talking about for us statewide, we're asking our staff to, we've bought UV sterilizers to sterilize N95 masks so they can reuse them. We are struggling with hand sanitizer, gowns, over-the-ear masks. I think you're going to see in the next, week to 10 days, a recommendation come out that broadly people start to wear masks. I think that recommendation is going to come out from the CDC so that the people in this room should be wearing them when you're out in public. I think that's going to be a recommendation. Culturally, it's going to be difficult for the U.S. To accept that, but supplies are, they're difficult to get.
Stacy, who's making the request then? If we have a shortage of supplies, and I don't know if you're telling me we have a shortage or not. I mean, I don't know if your answer got to that.
So we,
But who makes that request?
So we have, as a nonprofit healthcare provider, we have been making requests through the vendors that we use on a daily basis. But in our various regions, we've also made requests through the Emergency Operations Center. So our health centers based in the Quad County has asked the city for assistance. Our health centers based in Elko and Lander County has asked Lander County. Our health centers based in Nye and Clark County have asked Clark County, Southern Nevada Health District. Southern Nevada Health District, quite honestly, is being rather stingy with the items they got. They got a very, very large shipment of PPE, and they're essentially keeping it all for themselves. They're going to do at some point drive-through testing of symptomatic people. Now, they're going to let people decide themselves if they're symptomatic. They're not going to screen like we are. But for us, the way we're dealing with it is the same way as Nikki suggested. We have a call center. If you call our call center and you're a patient, or if you're not a patient, we're going to pre-screen you. If you hit a certain criteria, we're going to hand you off to a nurse who in our company will triage you further. If you're deemed to be qualified for testing, we'll direct you to one of our health centers where we are doing in-car testing of people. So we're not bringing them inside, but what we're finding, and I'm sure Nikki is finding this too, people are circumventing that and just coming to the door and lying about the symptoms they have. Then once they get into an exam room, they're being honest with people. So there are people out there who are endangering the lives of healthcare providers by not being truthful about the symptoms that they're suffering. So there are a lot of problems. That's not a great number, but it doesn't take many. We've already had within our company, and we have about 475 employees, I think we've tested 35. Unfortunately, all have been negative, but all have been exposed to people who are COVID positive because they did not either self-disclose or they flat out lied about their condition. So, PPE is a struggle. It's a struggle. And there's competition for it, and a lot of the companies that we use are they're prioritizing. So let's say we use a company called McKesson. They're a supply company. We buy all of our supplies from them. They have prioritized that their gear is going to go to government first, and then after that, it's going to go to hospitals and healthcare centers in the hardest hit areas. So by the time they've given out the allotment that they get, it's gone. Because government has either gotten it or the high impact areas have gotten it. So.
Tom.
I might be able to shed a little light there. At the EOC level, we get requests from all healthcare facilities, EMS agencies, all providers within the Quad counties to our logistics section. Those requests are inputted into the state system and go up to basically the state EOC to be filled. And as you can imagine, the state EOC is having just as hard a time as anybody else in getting PPE.
With that process, Tom? Have we gotten any PPE using that process going to state EOC?
Actually, we have. The state has released part of their stockpile. And we did get
What does that mean in terms of numbers?
well, we've gotten a shipment of N95 masks that we're in the process of distributing to all of the people in the Quad counties that made requests to us. We've gotten a shipment of gloves and gowns, and the only thing I don't think we've received any face or eye protection at this point, but all of the other supplies that we've gotten, we've distributed on a prioritized as-needed basis to the people who asked for supplies in the Quad County area. So we've already done that once. We got a
Do you feel
shipment
comfortable we
in.
can address this do you feel comfortable that we have enough resources here, or do we have to go out and get more for our community and the other 3 counties? Are we,
Well, we have.
there are 5
we-
elected officials up here. We can all do something.
We have enough to get us through a week, maybe 2. That's the problem. Going out and getting some, like you say, there aren't any places to go out and
What's
get
the
it
health
from.
department doing about that? What is health doing about that?
So where we're at right now, we are working with the EOC as far as getting, they're getting the supplies in, and then it's being distributed through the EOC. Health is not taking that on our own. That's what we have the EOC for.
So health is not ordering any PPE.
We've ordered some in the past, and our orders have been unfilled. Some of the orders have been canceled, or they're back ordered until who knows when, but
How
it's,
difficult is it to submit an order? If we're not submitting them anymore, if it's just putting numbers down on a paper, I'd submit every 2 hours.
We are submitting orders
and we're letting the
on
EOC take
on
care
a
of all
daily
that.
basis.
And
It's,
most of what happens is
these
that-
orders just can't be filled.
Yeah, that the companies that you work with, they will call you and tell you when you could submit an order. They aren't you can't go, like the companies we use, 4 or 5 suppliers, you can't just go onto their website and order masks or gowns or PPE because they're not accepting the orders. So you have to wait for your rep at that company to call you and say, okay, go ahead and put in an order, and you're asking for 1,000 masks, we'll go ahead and give you 200.
Hey, Thomas,
So that's
anybody
what's
ever call-
happening.
Any of our suppliers ever called us?
We've called them, and
They call us and say,
and
hey, we've got something, or are we calling them and?
we're calling them on a daily or weekly basis. And the projection to fill some of these orders has been 6 months. Some of these projections to get stuff in, they'll say, well, we can get it to you in 6 months. But everybody's in the same boat with these types of supplies nationwide. We were caught in a predicament where these companies can't fill as many orders as there are out there right now. And they're prioritizing and penciling out these type of resources to the most needed areas of the country right now.
And a lot of the problem is that where these products come from is the countries that were hit first.
Right.
So production of masks and gowns and goggles stopped when the coronavirus hit China and hit Taiwan and hit Vietnam. It stopped. So that's complicating. There are very few companies in the U.S. that make these products. So.
Do you know any of the background behind us shipping 80 tons to Thailand of PPE by aircraft in the last week?
I did not hear anything about that. That would be tragic if we did
Went
that.
through USAID?
I did not see that. I didn't see that. The other problem they're talking about, everyone's, talking about price gouging and all that kind of stuff, and that's all well and good because the companies you have a relationship with, the prices that they charge for these products. But now what we're running into is we're reaching out to companies we've never used before, and I'm sure the EOC is finding this. And you don't know if the price that they're charging you is the price that they always charge, or if it's an elevated price. So there are people who are now in the business of selling masks that have never been in the business of selling masks. So instead of charging you $1.93 for an N95 mask disposable, they're charging you $3.95 for one. And you can't get them for price gouging because they've never sold them before. So they're setting their initial price So it really is a complicated, it's more than anyone can summarize in a 5-minute conversation. It's really a complicated issue.
I don't mean to take up all the time here, but it'd be interesting to have that kind of information, on a rolling daily basis. How many masks we have left? What is going on with those? How many tests do we have? I mean, I get the impression that, I have never seen a firm number come out on how many tests we have in Carson City.
Well,
and I've kind of thought in the back of my mind that we don't want to tell anybody.
I can tell you that organizationally, our company meets, our command team meets every day at 7:00, and we talk about that very thing. We talk about, we're literally down to counting how many gowns we have left, how many N95 masks we have left. I just got a shipment of, from the State Health Lab in Reno, of 50 test kits that we're going to split up between our rural region, and I'll get another 50 next week. Before that, we were limited to commercial labs giving us test kits, and we were limited to 5 test kits per private lab per week per site. So, and we deal with 2 companies, one called Lab, one called Quest. They would give us 5 each. Now, about 2 weeks ago, Quest stopped giving them because they were switching all of their tests over to the hospital or something. They said they weren't going to go to local physicians' offices anymore. So that's the reason the CDC guidelines have to be followed before you just swab somebody. That's the reason if you were to be symptomatic and you called our doctor's office or her health department or any other doctor's office and you had mild symptoms, you would be told to stay at home and self-quarantine. You would not be told to come in and be tested. I think some of that is going to change. I had a phone call yesterday with a company called Verified First. They're based out of Utah. They have developed a blood test as a screening tool to detect COVID-19. Now, they've asked for emergency declaration from FDA. That is not approved yet. So I think you're going to see Abbott Laboratories sometime this week. I believe it was the first, got approved for a rapid COVID test. We have been on the phone with Abbott and suppliers of Abbott for a week. We're not going to see one of those Abbott rapid screening tests unless Nevada becomes a hotbed, because it's all going to go, everything they can manufacture is going to go to California or New York or on the East Coast. So, 3-4 months down the road, I think things are going to look different than they look today. But today, I guarantee you, there's not a doctor's office or a health agency in the state that isn't counting quantities of PPE every day on their hand and hoping that they can get through the day.
That's what we do every morning in the EOC also. And we do have a branch that talks to everybody in the Quad counties on a daily basis, how many gowns, how many masks, how many gloves, all of that. How many do you have left? And how long can you sustain your operation with the equipment that you have? And
that's important
I'm not sure
information.
that-
Tom, that's important information for us to have up here as well. I mean, unless you think you can't share that with us, but I think we need to know what the status of the PPE situation is in our community, what's the actual status of people who are being tested, how many are we testing, how many came back, and I know you see some of that on the governor's website, but I think it'd be nice to have it from our folks. So, a little bit.
So some of that information we talked about in the hall prior to coming in, and I understand that you weren't getting the information in a timely manner to answer questions from the public. What I came up with out in the hall was our JIC forwards a press release. It comes out at 10 a.m. every day. Oh, our Joint Information Center, I'm sorry, puts out a press release 10 a.m. every day with Carson City and Quad County numbers associated with it as far as.
Where does it go? What do you do that? Where does that information go?
That goes out in a press release to the media, to all of our partnering agencies. My understanding was that it was making it to you guys, and that's been corrected. We will have the JIC forward that press release to Rachel to disseminate to city staff prior to the 10 a.m. release, so that you guys
Maybe I'm
have
going
the
crazy, Tom,
information.
but
Pardon me?
Huh?
They post it every morning.
You
and
post
It's
it
every
on the-
all, it's all also on the website every morning,
I
yes.
get that.
But it's not talking about PPE. It's not, it doesn't get into that kind of
And-
detail, and
and
that's
I'm-
what the mayor is asking.
That's what I'm trying
I'm
to
not
get at.
basically the
sure
number
that
of
we
tests
want
and-
that, the PPE count and numbers out in the public like
Right,
that.
but it doesn't mean you couldn't share it with us.
We could share with you on a daily basis.
We need, I think we need to know up here, I know we got a health department, we got the EOC going, but we need to know what the status of our community is here. And I suspect Lyon and Story and Douglas are in the same position. I mean, we're kind of like a mushroom up here from
Would
the
it-
health department because we're not getting anything.
So would it suffice if we said we have enough PPE to carry us through a week or
Sure,
2
something like
weeks?
that.
Or would you like it in a numbered count every day?
I'd prefer a number,
Okay, we'll see if we
because
can.
otherwise it doesn't really mean anything.
We'll see
to
if we
me.
can, the thing is, response-wise, each day changes. We may have several responses that need PPE on one day and none the next. So if you project that out, and if I give you a number one day,
But it's not, the projection is the point, though, because then you're looking at trending, which is really important to us. You want to see which way the trending is going. Is it still going up towards the peak? Is it leveling off? Is it coming down? I mean, we can do, I think, our own math, but I think it's really important that if we have daily numbers, then we can do the math. And right now, as the mayor said, I don't have a clue what's going on.
okay, I'll see if we can arrange that sort of information to be forwarded to you guys on a daily basis.
And then if I can just address the testing and the testing kits. We ourselves don't have the true picture of what the number of tests that are being performed in Carson City. We can tell you what we at the health department do, but we've got Nevada Health Centers testing, we've got the hospital testing. So what we're getting from all the testing is the positives. So that's the only information that we have. The state is attempting to put this all together as far as how many tests are being conducted because they have the information from the different labs. So the test gets performed, it goes to a specific lab. And so they're trying to pull the information together from the labs. The problem with that I was on an email string last night, is the information comes from where the person was tested, not from where they reside. So the information as far as the tests that are being performed out in the community, we don't have that information. I can tell you what we have ourselves.
Nikki, wouldn't it be possible to, there aren't that many, and I don't know about other providers' offices other than ours, if anyone's doing anything. I assume Carson Medical Group is doing some testing, I would guess. Maybe they're not. I don't know the answer to that. But it seems like there's a finite number of places you could go to get this information. And maybe if, as I suggested to Jeannie at the last meeting, if the EOC reaches out to those people who are doing testing and says, can you just give us a daily count of how many you've tested? The positives you'll know about because
We get
it
the
gets
positives.
reported. But, we do a daily count. And it would not be that hard for us to send you an email once a day saying, we tested 20 people yesterday, or we screened 15 people and we COVID tested 5, as an example. And I'm sure the hospital would be willing to do the same thing. I mean, you can't really require private entities to do that, but you can certainly ask. And I think, I think you'd get a positive response.
And Nikki, we had asked, while you were gone, when Jeannie and Ronnie were here, to create a kind of a group between the health department and care providers to start a communications chain so that when the outbreak does get here, that we're being proactive and we're not trying to be reactive at that point.
Mhm.
And so this, what Stacy was just talking about, ties directly into the formation of that group. And we haven't gotten a status report back on whether anything was done with that request.
So even prior to COVID, we had the Healthcare Coalition, which is any healthcare provider is welcome to participate in that, long-term care, anybody that is within the healthcare system, the long-term care facilities, they can participate in this coalition. We had some hiccups with it. We now, this week, we have brought that back over to health. And that is, they started up with, they had a call on Tuesday, they had a call today. So this is where we're sharing out general information that we're getting from the state, and then individuals have a opportunity to ask questions. So that is what we have stood up again, and it has been brought back over to health.
So you would have the ability on the next call then to make the request that Stacy detailed where, here's a list of criteria that we would like to receive from you on a daily basis or weekly basis or whatever that may be.
We could do that. We can
put
that request out there.
into the,
That if and when we actually get hit hard with cases here, we're going to be really happy that we've stood that up.
And just so I can clarify, this is not a coalition that we stood up just for this circumstance that we're in right now. This coalition has been in existence, and it's a Quad County coalition. So it's that Carson City, Douglas, Lyon, Story County, and it's been in existence for a while. We were just having some hiccups with it. We had put it over at the EOC location and then decided to bring it back over to health.
And my only input to that, Nikki, is that I think this almost, that is good. I have in past participated in that, but our primary contact with that group has left our company. And I suspect that there are others who may be in that boat. So I think if you want to keep that going, that's great. But I think if you could take that and move it forward and make sure we're hitting everybody who wants to be hit. Because I think there are a quantity of people who maybe didn't participate because at the time it didn't have meaning to them. Because they didn't need PPE and they didn't need to know this information. And I think it's great that we had that coalition. But I also think it missed a lot of organizations because they said, well, that's not applicable to me. And whereas now it probably is.
Yeah.
I'm also curious whether we can use the coalition to consolidate ordering. So in other words, instead of having 20 groups call a vendor, if we can go through the EOC and have, everybody putting in a single order, I don't know. You guys have to tell me if
that's exactly what we've done. So everybody in the healthcare coalition that exists today is a participating member with healthcare needs and resource requests on a daily basis. The EOC tabulates that and catalogs those resources and puts the order out. The order goes through our state ordering system in Web EOC, and the state receives it and pushes it out either to the national stockpile or the state stockpile. If it's there, it'll come to us. If it's not, it gets the big back order number on it.
So Stacy, do I understand correctly that you're going through the EOC and in addition to that, you're reaching out to private vendors?
Yeah, because the EOC hasn't been able to fill our orders. So as an example, what we were able to do is finally find a vendor who will ship us N95 masks, but we have to order 15,000 of them. So when you start talking about those numbers, they'll start listening to you. Versus a single clinic ordering 1,000 masks, they're not going to listen to you. So We have a shipment of 15,000 masks coming in next Tuesday or Wednesday that we will share with, there are 9 FQHCs in the state of Nevada. We will share those with those 9 FQHCs. So we sort of formed our own cooperative.
Right, and that's my very point. If we can, by consolidating orders, take that order from, 10,000 to 100,000 and then be able to share them out.
Yeah.
Then maybe we can get somebody's attention. And for me, what's frustrating about this is that I could take you to a warehouse in Mount House where they currently have hundreds of thousands of PPE. And it's part of the national system. Sitting right there, and we can't touch it.
Exactly. And that's part of our frustration also. It's on a national priority system right now. The hardest hit areas now are getting priority. New York, California, Florida, Louisiana. They're getting the PPE above us right now because we don't have the priority they have right now. So, I mean, I can't explain it any better than that, but to access the national system, you get in line.
Who do we report to if we have a PPE order in that has never been filled? Or the number of times we've ordered something but never got anything back? Do we let anybody know that? Or do we just take the information and say?
No, we're talking to the state every day.
State by state, you're talking to who?
The state is our, we support health. The state supports local communities and EOCs.
So you're talking to state health, not the
No,
governor's office.
we're talking to the state EOC right now at Department of Emergency Management every day.
All right.
So they're supporting the locals in our resource requesting, and they're putting county orders together, which are huge, and they still can't.
Are we doing any modeling with respect to what we can anticipate in this community in terms of positive tests?
We have looked at the
occurrences?
King County model.
What does it say? The Supervisor Bunkowski said, what's the model show about if the poop really hits the fan here in our 4 counties, or call it Carson City? What's that number?
We, in our EOC IAP that we produce every day, we've looked at the 50 sick persons, 50 positive COVID patients, and 5 death model. That's the projection from King County for us in the Quad Counties. That's
Across the 4 counties, not.
across the 4 counties. And we're at 16 right now. 17, excuse me. How far out does it go? Well, the King County model is close to or just past their peak. So they're definitely 3 weeks ahead, 4 weeks ahead of us. So the next 2 weeks is going to be a big telling period for us as to where, if we're going to match that model or if our curve is going to be flatter. They didn't have the social distancing and the shelter-in-place practices in place at the time when they got hit hard. So with the mitigation that we're doing through the governor's orders, we're hoping that our line is going to be a little bit flatter. Our model's going to be a flatter line than what we saw in King County. That's what we're hoping.
Well, it's nice to be able to tell people that, hey, you're going through a lot of strain, a lot of different things going on in your life. You're told to stay at home, not go outside. It'd be nice to be able to tell them, hey, we're not making any progress, so we need to ramp it up. Or, yeah, you know what, our community's standing up, we're making progress. I don't know if you can do that in a situation like this, but we need to have hope going out in this community that, we're capable of taking care of Carson City and the three other counties that are with. We need that information out there. And I know we're putting it out on our webpage and stuff like that, but we need a little broader dissemination of it's like me, I'm going to do a PSA when I get back this afternoon on, about the governor's directives on shelter at home. So hopefully that's going to get on television somewhere. I know it will. But we need stuff like that. And I'm not doing enough either, so I'm not just telling you guys.
You're exactly right. We have, as it stands now, with the data we have in our hands, we're doing very well in the Quad Counties. We have had no deaths. We have had one recovery. Our total positives are at 17 throughout 4 counties, which is a population base close to what Washoe County is. So compare us, our model, with Clark and Washoe, we're doing very well.
Well, not that I want to say anything about other counties, but I think it's important for us to say, if it really is the truth, that, your efforts at staying home are we think they're working here. We can't tell you conclusively because it's probably can't do that. But we think that it's having an effect on the rate of contagion going on in our community. I just think we need to get that message out more because and it's going to change. I mean, I think the EOC is going to change from PPE stuff to taking care of people with depression and suicides and domestic violence. I think we're going to get in for a slug of that stuff, particularly towards the end of this month.
Right. That's also on our radar, and we do have we are planning for a recovery process also. So.
Okay.
And you're exactly right, Mayor. We all need to participate in, if we can stay at home, stay at home. If you can keep other individuals from coming into your home that you really don't need in there, it's best to do that. Make sure that if you're sick, you're staying home. That's a big one. A lot of us will, we've got a little sniffle and we can feel we can make it through the day. Well, with this, we're finding that it's more contagious than other infectious diseases like the cold. And so if you're sick, stay at home. Over at the health department, we're going to start instituting that we're taking everybody's temperature and we're going to have a single point of entry, and that's to protect our staff. But it's doing those types of things, and it's just thinking about your everyday actions. When you get at home in the evenings, wash your hands. Keep your, I know I keep my shoes in the mudroom. I don't traipse around the house. I'm thinking about what those high-touch areas are that I've touched throughout the day and have cleaned them appropriately. So, and everybody needs to take responsibility for some of that.
So we all need to be like Mr. Rogers.
No.
And I think as well that we need to be aware of our words. Because as Stacy mentioned earlier, people are out there talking off the top of their head and not understanding the consequence of their words. And what I mean by that is I know of a circumstance where a lady was riding in a car with 4 other women and said, yeah, I had to take my mom to the test center to be tested for COVID-19 yesterday. And they look at her and it's like, then what are you doing in the car with us? We have had more instances than I can count where people have said, I think I was exposed. Well, if you think that you were exposed, then you should have gone home and stayed there for 6 days at least.
Exactly.
And then decide whether you should be going out and speaking to people. So number one, I think that people need to use a little common sense. And if you think you were exposed, don't go around talking to people about how you think you were exposed. The one circumstance that I can think of, the person who said, I think I was exposed, was talking to a 78-year-old bookkeeper in her office, private office. And it's like, the bookkeeper just freaked out, threw her out of the building. It's like, common sense, folks. Use a little common sense.
Well,
thank you for that.
The height of it to me is the example of the people that come to our health center, any health center, and say that they're there because they have a bellyache, and it turns out that they've had a temperature and a cough, and they don't reveal that till they're in the room with a doctor. So we lose probably once a week 1 or 2 doctors who have to be pulled out of our system that cannot provide care until that individual who came in and said they weren't having respiratory issues, have their test come back negative before we can take that provider and put them back into the pool. So we're losing, we lose providers that way.
And it's not only providers that
Yeah,
our
it's the
agencies are
support staff, too.
losing, it's the support staff, it's our law enforcement, it's our emergency, the EMS system. So it's all over.
And I think it goes beyond that because the numbers I'm seeing are, a third of positive cases are going to test negative. So even if you put that medical provider back on the line, it doesn't mean that they aren't positive and then turning around and spreading it because they're asymptomatic.
No, you're right. I mean, you do take chances, We've gone to a lot of screening or doing telehealth visits and doing direct-to-consumer where I think we did 700 last week statewide visits where we did them to either their iPad, a computer, or their telephone. You can't do everything that way, but that's where it's going. All of our behavioral health visits have been switched to these telehealth visits. So every behavioral health visit our company does, and we have, I think, 5 or 6 therapists around the state, are being done virtually. So those people who have behavioral health or are seeking behavioral health treatment are not coming into a clinic where there are potentially sick people. And those are the kinds of things that are the new reality. And we still have people who absolutely refuse to do any kind of visit by phone or technology. And that's another thing that we need people to sort of try and get over, because if things get really bad, that may be the only way you're going to get care, unless you go to a hospital emergency room and you're that severe. Even EMS agencies are starting to do, and I don't know if we're doing it here, but even EMS agencies are doing now telephone screening and in-person video screening.
We're not doing that here, but we did institute a 1-point entry at the fire station. We have communal living at all of our fire stations. So everybody gets their temperature in the morning. Everybody is self-monitoring for signs. And these guys are going out 7, 8 times, maybe 10 times a day to visit a sick person. So we have to protect our staff. And that's one of the ways for us to keep Corona out of the fire stations and protect our staff.
And just to take this a little bit further, and I've asked my staff to do this, and I would encourage all of you and plus the public, it's, take a minute and think about if you are exposed, how in your own household that you're going to separate and keep somebody else within your household safe and not be exposed, potentially be exposed to you if you've been exposed. So that's something for all of us to think about and what that plan may look like. I know, just for myself, we would have our grandkids every other week. At this point, I have said, you are these two are in a household that has hunkered down, and there's no reason to bring them to my house because my husband and I are still out working. So it's those kinds of decisions that we all need to make to keep individuals safe.
Did they require you to be quarantined when you came back this last week from below the border?
No, because I did not come from an area that was requiring that.
How about the northern border? Are we quarantining people who had come from Canada?
Well, the requirements have changed since I traveled, and I'd have to look at, my understanding is now they're requesting anybody coming into the United States from another area be quarantined. And some states are even putting it that it's within the state. So all that's looked at.
All right, I apologize.
But I'm monitoring myself. making sure I don't have a temperature. Again, like I said, at the health department, we're gonna institute that as soon as we get equipment in. That's another thing, is trying to get equipment in to do
Well,
our
on the
jobs.
equipment thing, here's what my thought is. You go to state health with your requests, the ones that have been denied. I'm gonna go to the governor with them. If you give it to me, I'm gonna go to the governor's office and say, this is how many we've requested, this is how many we got, this is the problem we're getting. I'll do it daily. I don't care. I mean, they need to know that too, and I don't know what's coming out of Health and Human Services down to the governor's office. I mean, I probably shouldn't know either, but
And the governor's working on behalf of Nevada to try and
sure.
get some of that. I was hearing on phone calls, he was regularly calling Vice President Pence. So I believe he's working hard for that.
Okay, all right. Anybody else? Thank you, folks, for bearing with us here. We talked for about an hour, but that's all right. We need to get through these things. And I think the message is more information out to us. We need to know more about, what we can expect when we look down this thing, and let us know. I know you're putting stuff on, the website, but we'd like to know what's really going on over there, either in EOC or in your shop. And particularly, let us know, if you think one of us could put, you need help from one of the elected board members or all of us, let us know that too. I mean,
Sure.
I don't need any more work, and I don't know if anybody up here needs any more work, but this is a time when we all stand up. Okay? All right.
And I'm very grateful to the EOC. I mean, the EOC has taken a lot off of our plates that we don't have time to deal with.
Yeah.
And it's working very nicely. I know you noticed Jeannie was the EOC, Jeannie Freeman was the EOC, and then we changed to Tom. Jeannie did a great job.
Well, I'll tell you, she did a nice job. So you
As
pass that on.
IC, and, but I also needed her help in my shop.
Nikki, before we go, if you could just take a few moments, or both of you, to walk the public through the process when somebody does get tested and then it comes back as a positive test. Because my conversations with the public, there's virtually nobody out there that understands social contacting, what it means, why it's being done, and how that is the key component of containing spread.
So if we have an individual that tests positive, and like I had said earlier, the health department's gonna get those notifications no matter where they get tested. Because as soon as a positive shows up, and this is with any communicable disease, then it comes to the health department. So if an individual is positive, then our investigation team will contact that individual. They will find out what their contacts have been, and then decide, based on what their contacts have been, where those individuals need to self-isolate. And those individuals will be contacted from the health department and saying, you also need to self-isolate for 14 days. Then they become a person that is being monitored. So we've got our positive individuals that we're following up with every day, and we have our individuals that are being monitored. We are also following up with those individuals. What is your temperature today? How are you feeling? We're even taking it a little bit further into, are you getting what you need? Is there anything, is there somebody that can bring you food if you need it? So we're diving down a little deeper to find out what their social needs may be. So that's how that process is.
So let's take it a step further. So if an employee or a tenant has somebody in a building who coughs for whatever reason, and so then a person calls either dispatch or calls the health department or calls whoever, the property manager, and says, oh my God, somebody in the building is sick, you need to shut down the building, you need to come in and clean the building, deep medical cleaning. That is not going to happen, nor should it happen.
Correct.
Until there's a documented positive case, at which point, through the social contacting and the investigative team, you would contact whoever is in management or in charge of that building to notify them that there's been a positive case and that these steps need to be taken or not be taken.
So, so many situations are different. Are we, of our positive people, are we going to be contacting where they work? Probably not, because that's protected health information, which then we get into the whole HIPAA laws. But in talking with the individual, then we would say, I highly, you need to let your employer know, because your employer is, they need to know they're not going to be back for 14 days, and they may end up getting very sick. But then if you've got a tenant situation, then it's that, in my opinion, it's that business that needs to take the necessary steps. It's not us directing them. So I would just put out the situation, and I know you're talking businesses, Brad, but I've got a rental. If one of those individuals in my rental turned up positive for COVID, do I really need to know? Probably not. But it's going to be up to them to make sure that the place is cleaned.
Right, but if you're talking about a business that has 100 employees and one of those employees ends up testing positive, businesses don't understand what the process is. They don't understand what their responsibility is in that situation. Do they have to close the whole building down? Well, I would think that the answer to that's likely to be no.
Right, and it would depend on, again, like I said, each situation is different. It's that investigation process and how we move forward with that. And this investigation process, it's with any infectious disease. So that team does this all the time. And, they're following the same process they have all along. So nothing's changed with COVID. It's still that same investigation process.
I hate to ask the time bomb question, but how long does it take these tests to come back? That must complicate your contacting people and getting who they've contacted in the time frame.
Actually, all of our tests go to the Nevada State Public Health Lab, and we're getting them back quickly, like 1 to 2 days. They test, we do our best to get our test up there by 1 p.m.
Thank you.
So
That
can be
would cut the
run.
time or the number of people that somebody had contact with. If it was a week, it'd be a lot longer. Yeah.
Yep.
And realize that when these people are tested, they go home and isolate. They're not getting a test and then just going out and doing whatever they're doing. They're
we
getting
hope
a
so.
test, they're going home, and they're isolating.
And that's the direction that they're being given, that this is what you need to do.
And I don't mean to be a negative nabob, but the truth of the matter is that Brad used the term common sense. I saw an interview with Charlie Munger, who once said, no, it's actually uncommon sense, because a lot of people don't have common sense. Excuse me for putting it that way.
And we can be exposed anywhere. We can be exposed going to the grocery store. And so that's where we got to protect ourselves and protect our family and our work family.
Okay, any other questions? Go, Lori,
So-
you've been quiet down there.
You guys are just having a good time. So my question for the public also is, we see the daily report on the number of positive cases, and then recovery always shows 0. Can you please help define what that means? So when does the person move into their recovered? So they tested positive, they've quarantined 14 days. Why aren't we seeing recovered?
So we're very happy to report today we have 1 recovered. So that means that you've got an individual tested positive, they have went through that 14-day or longer, depending on the timing of when they get a negative test again. So it's not always just 14 days, it can be a longer period. And would be testing them, and they would be considered recovered when they have a negative test.
I think
Our current
beyond
co-
the 14 days.
It
I
could-
think it's helpful for people because they keep seeing the 14-day, and we can count the original number and know that's beyond 14 days, and
It can, again, situation, it could be 14 days, it could be longer. It just depends on, how they are recovering. So,
the current tests that we have available to us only show a positive when the virus is active in our bodies. So that virus has to go its course, whether it takes 14, 21 days, it's individual, everybody's different. And then when they can test negative again, and that virus is no longer active in their body, then they're recovered.
so they are no longer contagious.
And there is not an FDA-approved test yet for the COVID-19 antibody test. They're working on it. Companies are working on it. That company that I mentioned earlier, Verified First, believes they have a blood test that will reveal antibodies, but it's not FDA-approved yet.
And just keep in mind, there's many other, we were dealing with the flu, dealing with other, and I can say just from the testing that we are doing at our facility, it's under 10% that are testing positive.
So what happens if, do you ever run into the situation, the hospital is doing drive-through testing up on Fleischman? How do we know that, how does the hospital know whether or not somebody who's used the drive-up to get another test hasn't already gone to our Health and Human Services? How do they know that, or would they know that?
So if they're going up to the hospital and going through theirs, we may not know because
You
people
wouldn't
aren't going to tell. People aren't going to tell.
You wouldn't know.
So
They
that's
they
one
could go
way-
get a test at HHS, they could go get a test at the hospital, then they could come to us and get a test.
I would see more that somebody would try to get a test at Nevada Health Centers, try and get a test at the hospital, and then try through our process to get a test. I really wouldn't see where they would get multiple tests. It's a very uncomfortable test to have done.
They're just putting something up your nose. We
Yeah, I
do that all the
think,
time.
what would,
It-
and what
it's
we've seen
further.
is, what
It's
Nikki said is what we've seen, is that we've had somebody show up at one of our clinics in Las Vegas and not qualify for a test. And then they'll go to another one of our health centers and try and get a test there. And we'll catch that because it's the same medical record system. But when we're doing disparate medical record system, you wouldn't catch it.
And we don't always know, they probably have went through these multiple different avenues to try and get a test. We don't know that, but we can tell a little bit through the call center. We now have what you call test shopping. So they're looking to get a test. And
So one of the rumors that's going on around out there is that Health and Human Services is not going to test you. They're not going to tell you you've got the symptoms that would qualify you for a test because they don't have the test kits.
we have test kits, we arrange for testing.
Just leave it like that, all right. But I mean, because that's the kind of stuff that gets out there. I think we're all talking about, this, the stuff that, becomes the truth when it's out there.
Well, and
So-
as we said earlier, if you are not severely compromised, there's nothing that can be done for you to have the test. So you can call any one medical provider who runs through a verbal screening with a person, and you may have all the symptoms of COVID-19. You may have COVID-19, you may have a cold, you may have a regular upper respiratory infection. The point is, the treatment is exactly the same. There's nothing that can be done. So you stay home for 14 days, and when you feel better, you go back out again. And so it's a perfectly acceptable form of treatment, if you will, to say that you've got to self-quarantine if you're experiencing these symptoms. Because short of providing treatment for someone who's compromised because they can't breathe or they've developed pneumonia, which is a complication of COVID-19, it's a completely different story. So if someone's having difficulty breathing or shortness of breath, that's not the same thing as someone who has the early symptoms of COVID and doesn't progress to a worse case. There's nothing, there is really essentially no treatment. And the treatments that people are hearing about on the news relative to some of these anti-malaria drugs and whatnot still are experimental, but they're only being used in cases where someone's in a hospital and where someone is, for the most part, having a choice between taking the anti-malaria drugs or dying. So, you know, there's nothing that anyone's going to do. So it is perfectly acceptable to.
Stacy, was there really a thought that all us old folks we're going to have mandatory DNRs put in our file?
I haven't heard that.
I haven't heard that either.
So the takeaway from that is that the number of positive cases is grossly underrepresented. Do we have an idea, are there stats out there or projections that say the actual number is 10 times, 20 times, 30 times?
I have not seen that data out there on that.
I haven't seen anything either.
And it'll take a year to get it.
Yeah, I think you won't get that until we get to the point where you can do an antibody test to see that you've had it.
Yeah, the number that I saw from China and Italy was 27 times the positive test.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that seems kind of high, but it wouldn't surprise me.
The reason I bring that up is that the U.S. right now has a little over 200,000 positive tests. And if that number were to be true 27 times that's 5.5 million people that are walking around with it right now.
That number wouldn't shock me.
Yeah.
Well, what would?
The bonus, the good part of that is there are probably that many 27 times the recoveries also. So we're probably seeing, or we're not seeing those individuals who are positive at the time, and we're not seeing those people who have developed antibodies who have recovered. So yeah, there's no way of knowing until we get that test.
And like Nikki said, the conversion rate on people that we do test, so you do the screening, you do the symptomatic screening, you do a flu screen, you do a strep screen, and you know, then maybe they are swabbed for COVID, but the numbers are, I mean, it's 10% or less of the people who get a COVID test that are converting. So, and they have, so you have to realize that if you're getting the nose swab for COVID-19, you've got all the symptoms of having COVID. You've been confirmed to not have flu and not have strep. So there's a lot of people who have viruses out there that are very similar to COVID-19 that don't have COVID-19, but just have another similar rhinovirus.
Correct.
So the numbers, you know, the social distancing thing and all of that is stuff that, you know, in this Western world we're uncomfortable doing, that we culturally don't do, you know. But it just proves that there's a lot of sickness out there that isn't this sickness.
Yeah.
But the question I ask is, does that 27 times, even if, we don't know if that's true, include or not include the asymptomatic people? Do they have it, or are they just carriers?
Don't know.
Yeah, you don't.
I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. I think most of the stuff that I'm reading is that they're finding that the percentage of asymptomatic people is less and less. Almost everyone has some kind of a symptom. It's a level of severity issue. I haven't read much that says there are these sort of silent people except for the period of time before they begin symptoms, right? There's a period of time we know that people can be carrying the virus and transmitting it to people before they have symptoms. But the number of, the stuff I've read, the number of people who have asymptomatic coronavirus is really small. It's much smaller than your 25%.
Good.
And some of it could be that, at the time of testing, there's not enough viral load to pick up that test. So just because an individual tests negative today does not mean that, they may test positive in 3 days. So it's that viral load that your body produces when the test is done.
And I think one of the other early problems with the testing was that this test is a much deeper nasal swab. And so I think you were seeing providers who are used to doing a flu swab, which is not as invasive as a COVID swab, were getting false negatives because they weren't, which I think led to your number, because they weren't, it is not a comfortable swab to be done, and it has to be done properly. So it took a while for providers who weren't doing those kinds of swabs routinely to get this procedure down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes pretty far up your nose.
One last question for me. If a private provider here in Carson City, say I call my doctor, and she feels that I've got all the symptoms of COVID, okay? Does she call the health department or an emergency room, or none of those?
We've had doctors call us.
What do you do with them?
That's something, Dustin, the epidemiologist, will talk with that doctor. And in certain instances, we've arranged for testing.
Well, what's the protocol say? Should the doctors call you or call the hospital? Call a hotline or the hospital?
We don't have a written protocol on it. A lot of the doctor's offices around Carson have a relationship already with Dustin Booth, our epidemiologist, so he will get those calls. So do we have an actual protocol set up for that? No.
My suggestion to you is that you set up a protocol like that, because there's a lot of, I know it sounds unusual, but there are doctors out there who complain that, they're not getting information about first level information about where they call.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we can definitely reach out.
That's my last rant. All right. Anybody else got a rant? No? You want to rant back, Tom or Nikki?
I'm good.
You're good. Nikki, you good?
I'm good for right now.
All right. Before you guys leave, let me just, I got a note while we were talking here from the Chief First Amendment Officer over the Nevada Appeal, who says that Ottawa's car dealers can sell off the lot. Okay? How's that? He said he was listening to us. So car dealers can do that. Okay, anything else on this subject? Got enough to go home with? All right. Let's then get ready to do the final one. Tell Nancy to come on back in. Thank you very much. Yeah, Nikki, what you have to do is, you guys are doing a lot of work there. Let people know about it. And you've been practicing this for 12 years since I've been mayor on pandemics. Get out there and show them this is what all that practice did for us.
That's true. We're really busy right now, so it's hard to get some of this stuff out, but as we do our after action and that, you'll hear a lot.
Mayor. Yeah.
Yes. Just a reminder, April 1st was the beginning of the census. And so all Nevada residents, it's online now. So Nevada residents should be going to www.census.nv.gov to fill out the census forms.
Well, you have to get a code to do the online census. They're sending them in the mail and you get an actual code number, because some they're giving long form, short, anyway. You'll get a code number. I did mine, it's done. has a code that you need so that they can make sure they don't have duplicates and. Comes with a neat little code, long code, but.
Yes, Mayor. I just wanted to take this opportunity to elaborate on a couple of things. So you had identified the answer to your previous question about car sales. And yeah, no, and in fact, right. Yeah, no, and I want to thank him for sending that article over. I got a copy of it as well from Supervisor Bagwell earlier, so I did see that. But again, I kind of wanted to emphasize again, really why. I mean, that kind of shows just how ambiguous and confusing, these times are with respect to what is and is not an essential business. Because with respect to, this determination that was made by a spokesperson on behalf of the governor's office, it wasn't that, this question was clear, that this answer was clear in the emergency regulation. It was that this was a determination based on an interpretation of the governor's office that, hey, based on our intent, we did not mean to shut down as operations or businesses, retail car sales. But again, if you're the average Joe, or even if you're an attorney and you're reading the provisions of this emergency regulation language, you would never know. So you'd have to try to decipher that and figure that out. I'm happy to hear, of course, that's an important industry here, in Carson City and also throughout the state. So I'm glad we have some clarification there. The other question that you had earlier was with respect, Mayor, to the status of our state and local business licensing requirements and those annual fees. And I did have an opportunity in the last hour or so to go back and pull up that revised declaration from the governor's office. So I wanted to speak, on the record and let everyone know that based on my reading of those provisions, so state and local licenses and business permits are extended for 90 days from the current expiration date, or, right, this is state and local licenses, right? State and local licenses, if that's been issued to you and it expires within this period where the emergency has been declared, it's good for an additional 90 days from the date of your expiration or the date on which this emergency declaration is lifted, whichever is later. There's a caveat there, of course, which says that's only if there is a reduction in governmental services, which makes timely renewal of your license not possible. All right, so that's the condition that's written into that clause. There's also a provision in the revised declaration that speaks to annual state business renewal fees. So if you have a state business license, you have your annual renewal fees. That's also extended. The due dates are extended for an additional 60 days from the date this emergency is lifted. So it's not from the date of when it's due, it's just 60 days from whenever the state of emergency is lifted by the governor. And who knows when that date will actually be. So there's a little bit of uncertainty, but the dates to remember or the time periods to remember are, for state and local business licensing purposes, it's 90 days. And then for the renewal fees, it's 60 days. Those are the two dates to remember.
Are those retroactive?
I do not believe that those are retroactive. I think there was another provision in there that says with respect to the business renewal fees, the annual state business renewal fees, if you've already paid a penalty within this period. So meaning, for example, you missed your due date and you've paid a penalty that attaches to that, but that occurred during this period of time, I think you get a reimbursement of that. As to whether or not this is retroactive, I think what you mean to say is, does this go back to the period of time before this emergency was declared? I don't think that's the case. I think it's if your license expires during this period of the declaration, then it's extended out for that period of time.
So I had a question because a lot of the doctor's offices and everywhere are only taking doing telemedicine, all that other type of stuff. We have a whole bunch of individuals that their handicap parking permits are expiring. So the doctor has to sign a form that then goes to DMV. Are all of those extended? So they won't so if they have a placard that they have in their car and they park at Walmart to go grocery shopping, and they have a March or April expiration, they won't be ticketed
I have not seen anything in the
Just thought
declaration
I'd-
that addresses that part.
at all? I just thought maybe someone hasn't even thought about it,
But wouldn't we be able to address that at a local level? Because it wouldn't it?
giving them a ticket. Well, I'm bringing that up. That's the whole point. I think we should address that, and hopefully the sheriff's office, if they have the placard and it has a March, April, May 2020 expiration, we're not going to give them a ticket.
Sure seems like that's another one that gets filed under common sense.
Well, it should, but I'm still getting the questions from the public, but I used that answer and told them to park. But I think we should, I don't know, is that a local,
You could make it a motion.
okay, to, how
You'd
long
have
do
to
we
be
want to
specific.
extend?
But we're under non-action items.
Oh, yeah, gotta go back.
Well, we could go
on-
back.
Go back on 14? Because it is a local ordinance for tickets, correct? For,
Well, it wouldn't have any effect on, for instance, Highway Patrol. Highway
Right.
Patrol could still write the
right,
ticket.
but our sheriff's office would not
Our
be.
code enforcement, right?
Right, for
We're not going to be
handicap
able to dictate
parking.
to Highway Patrol that they can't write a ticket. But we can say that our local ordinance,
Yeah, I wish I had some expertise in these criminal provisions, and I don't. But I do want to exercise some caution here with respect to what the board is anticipating or thinking about doing. The reason why I say that is that there's a big overlap between, what the state exercises authority and jurisdiction over versus what local governments are allowed to have overlapping authority over. So what I mean by that is, with respect to, let's say, for example, the statutory requirement that you have to be able to provide proof of insurance when you're pulled over by a peace officer, all right? That is something that locals don't really have any control over, all right? Now, does that mean that a local, sheriff's deputy cannot issue a citation for that? No, they can. Of course, I mean, that's an obligation under that statute because you're required by law to be able to provide proof of your insurance. But would, let's say, for example, the district attorney's office have unfettered discretion to say, that's not something we're going to look at, as a charge. I mean, that's something that we're going to wholesale just dismiss that, in terms of fines and fees. I mean, certain circumstances, I'm not saying that there's a blanket approach to that, but what I mean is with respect to jurisdictional authority, there are certain things that locals can do and there are certain things that states can do, and there's an overlap, but there are certain things that locals cannot do. I don't know for certain. I would imagine there is some sort of a statutory provision that speaks to handicap decals, because obviously you're using the handicap decal not just in your local jurisdiction, but in any other parking area throughout the state. So I don't know what would be the effect of a motion or how that should sound or be written as for purposes of this board in asking or requiring our local officials not to issue citations for that, especially in light of the fact that I have not seen anything right now issued from the governor's office that addresses that specific circumstance. So I'm not trying to invalidate Supervisor Bagwell's suggestion. I think it's a valid point, and it's one of those, again, like Supervisor Bonkowski mentioned, one of those common sense things. And maybe it's getting lost in the shuffle because there are so many other things we're trying to identify as we go on a day-by-day and case-by-case basis. I would have a very difficult time advising this board how to craft a motion like that without being able to spend a little bit of time and conferring with my boss, Jason, as to exactly what the authority or the outer limits of our authority would be in terms of saying we're not going to issue any citations during this period of the declared emergency if you have an expired handicap decal. And I just want to be able to say that clearly, and I don't want to bluff to this board. I don't know the answer to that.
So potentially then, is there like a hotline or somewhere at the governor's office where local governments are fielding certain questions, or that we could write that in and say, hey, maybe you want to put out a directive for the DMV to be able to say, hey, placards will be honored for 90 days past expiration date or something of that nature, similar to what you just read on business licenses, and maybe we could just at least put the recommendation in to address it.
I'm happy to look, Supervisor. I'm not aware of an open means of communication channels like that. But certainly I'll look into that. Hopefully that hopefully they do have some sort of a receptacle for those types of questions and inquiries.
Would be great, because I doubt it's just affecting Carson City, so.
Dan, I assume that individual state offices can issue directives that supersede what the governor has come out with as far as licensing. In other words, the real estate division has said that all real estate licenses for renewals are extended by 90 days. So there's no provision in that directive that staffing has to be reduced at that state office. They're just saying everything's been extended by 90 days. So I assume that that may be the same across all state offices?
I think this is, again, one of those instances where you have your individual state offices or agencies making certain determinations. I wouldn't say that's necessarily or flagrantly inconsistent with the language that was issued through this declaration. But if your question is, can state offices or state agencies directly supersede a directive of the governor, I think my answer would be no. But with respect to if an agency which, falls under the executive branch of government is going to exercise a little bit of their own autonomous latitude, where that's not something the governor himself would say, look, I'm going to ask you or direct you to dial back because I believe that's inconsistent with the language of my directive. I think that's where sort of the gray line exists. But again, very specifically to your answer or your question as to can individual state agencies, which are all under the same umbrella of the executive branch of government, can they individually as an office supersede what the governor has issued under his emergency declaration powers? I think that's pretty clearly no.
I have one more thing related to Nancy. If you could just, one of the messages I got while I was here is that the flashing lights in some of the school districts have not been turned off. So can we talk to Public Works and maybe adjust that so that it isn't confusing to people? Thank you. Out of the Ash King Marlette system.
Anyway, shoot, okay.
Yeah, maybe we can work with the appeal to let them know that people shouldn't use the WebEx unless they're wanting to testify, because I think was confusing to people.
Very confusing. All right. Last public comment. Sorry for everybody who's waiting on public comment. Anybody on public comment? The last one? Kevin, are you out there? Kevin Hill? Hello? Hello? We're in here. I should turn my mic off. All right, Nancy, what are we doing?
Desi?
Kevin Hill looks like he's the only one in public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Kevin, come on up.
That's it for public comment, Mr. Mayor. Kevin Hill is no longer in the room.
No other public comment?
No other.
Let me just, Dan, are we ready to retire then?
Yes, we are.
We done enough on public comment?
I believe we have.
Absent objection, then the board is adjourned until the next regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors.